Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith along with Richard Bodian, episode 212. Give me the high five, Richard. Known this guy since 1988. Is that right? 89?
89.
1989. That's when the internet started. This is going to be fun. Tell us, Richard Bodian, how did you get connected to tennis? Where did the journey begin? Usually we ask people what type of baby food you like, but we're going to skip that. Tell us how you got connected in tennis.
Initially, I played recreationally with my dad. It was something that he and I enjoyed. I was pretty heavily introverted, and it gave me something to do. And I started playing with my dad. And then after that, I did a little bit of court maintenance. I got involved in building and reconditioning hard-true tennis courts.
How old were you then?
I think I was in high school. I'm trying to remember, but I may have been 17 or 18 when I started to do tennis court construction. And then the gentleman that owned the tennis construction business, his dad owned an indoor tennis club in Bloomfield, Connecticut. So I started, actually, if I'm correct, before I even got to that, I went to Israel. And then when I came back, I actually gave up tennis. I gave up even hitting a tennis ball when I went to Israel.
You were in a kibbutz for...
Yep, I was on kibbutz, and then I was at Haifa University. That was a total of 6 months. I actually, through connections, I was connected with the Israeli tennis centers, and I went to Haifa Israeli tennis centers to kind of do a tryout with some of their competitive juniors. And again, I didn't know how to hit a tennis ball, but that's where I went through my reality check. And I was put on a court. I believe I did like a circle volley drill with some other, good juniors. And then I was pulled off the court and said, "Oh, we got to give this guy a reality check." And then I was set up with an 8-year-old kid to play a set. And I believe I won the first point. And then after that, nothing. But then I asked for help. And it was
probably Amos Manstore for...
It was very Anglo-Saxon. There were a lot of South Africans there at the time, English and South Africans. So I asked for help, and they said, "No, you have money. Go back to the States and go take lessons back there." And I remember they gave me one drill where they had me go kneel down on the court and just try to hit up on a serve, and that's it. And then they just let me loose, and they wouldn't help me. So then I gave up tennis.
57 years young. Going back even further, did you play other sports prior to tennis? A little bit of everything?
Baseball, Little League baseball. I wanted to play football. My parents didn't let me play football. The coach of the high school team wanted me to play soccer, didn't want to play soccer. So it was really mainly tennis and baseball. And I used to just, play football on the side and stuff like that, but that's about it. I didn't do any other sports.
We'll get into your Braden connection, but before we do that, let's go with your beginning steps in your tennis journey. But Vic Braden, way back when, the Israeli Tennis Federation used his book as a textbook. His book came out, Tennis for the Future, in 1977. So when would you have got out of high school? What year was that?
85. Yeah, I graduated in 1985.
So many years later. No, I can remember coaching Ruben Perchek, who was Jewish, and he was at the preparing for the Orange Bowl. Or Danny Cooper, who had so much to do with our tennis for a long time. I couldn't be there for the first day, and he was going to hook up with Ruben Perchek. And I said, "Danny, there was no cell phones." I said, how am I going to connect with him? I said, "Just go walk the courts. You'll know who he is." And sure enough, he could tell by just the way he hit the ball. Ruben's somebody who I worked with Vic Braden. You had to be on the Colombian Davis Cup team. Then he didn't stay with tennis. At one point, he was on the faculty, the medical faculty at Stanford. But anyway, one of the Israeli coaches went right up to Ruben and said, "You guys like Vic Braden?" So it's amazing around the world how many people use tennis for the future. And unfortunately, discarded it. I was told by Vic in China, some Western coaches truly happened. Is said, bring in those books and we'll burn them. Crazy. So tell us, you're in a kibbutz and you're in Israel. You come back to the U.S. You find out.
I stopped at Wimbledon on the way home because I got the itch to get back into tennis, at least got some interest. So I stopped at Wimbledon on the way home. And when I was at Wimbledon, I actually saw the same Davis Cup coach that was on the grounds when I had my reality check. I saw him walk by, and I saw the kids.
The Israeli.
Yep, the Israeli Davis Cup coach was there. I saw them walk by with the same kids that I was on the court with, and that was kind of interesting. But then I came back to the States, and I got hooked up to kind of work the desk at an indoor tennis club by the owner of the tennis court construction company that I worked for, and then I was invited to be an assistant tennis pro. I never taught in my life. So I can hit the ball okay, but I didn't have any lessons when I grew up. So I guess I was okay enough to get added or get invited to be an assistant tennis coach. And then I walked in the pro shop. It was called Tumblebrook Country Club over in Avon, Connecticut. Dave Kerr, who's passed away now, but Dave invited me to be an assistant tennis coach. But right when I walked in the pro shop, there was a Tennis Pro magazine article on tennis tech, and it was I read the article, and basically in the article it said, if you want to do anything in tennis, well, this is the Harvard School of Tennis Teaching. If there's anything, if you really want to be in tennis and learn tennis, this is where you go. So that's what I read, and then I set up a meeting. That was that summer, and I went down to visit. And Vic Diamond, I still remember Vic Diamond picked me up at the airport. You nicely arranged that, and Vic brought me to TJC, and then had an opportunity to meet with you and watch you give a lesson with Vic Diamond. And that was actually a jaw dropper because you guys were just working on overheads and you were consistently keeping the ball up in a lob and he wasn't missing an overhead. And that kind of gave me a clue that I needed to, go somewhere to learn if I wanted to do it. So, and Vic also told me on the way home when he brought me to the airport, he said the same thing. He said, if you want to do anything in tennis, this is where you go. You go to TJC and you go to the tennis tech program, and then I made a decision to do that fall.
Well, for our listeners, Tennis Tech, with that name, Tennis Tech, I didn't ask for permission. I just thought, okay, it's a 2-year school. Tyler Junior College was allowed to revise a general recreation curriculum to a full-fledged comprehensive degree program, and Eugene Allen, we've talked about it on the podcast before, he was a president of the board of trustees. He had the power of pen. So I remember he used to tell me not to call it a vocational school. He had set up a program for dental hygienists. He was a dentist. So Tennis Tech, Vic Diamond, coached high school tennis forever from Cleveland, Ohio, a very good senior player. I mean, he was a good player from the get-go, being able to play at, I believe, Cleveland State, 25s, 35s, 45s, 55s. He coached high school tennis forever. I remember he went out to the Vic Braden Tennis College where there was the United States Tennis Academy, Braden's course for tennis teachers. That's still his email. So you just came for the summer, then you had to go back home, or when you first came, you were bringing your bags?
Oh no, I came to visit to see what the college was like. It was kind of on the downside. The tennis camp that you were running in the summer just ended, so I didn't have a chance to really see what you guys were doing and all the technique and all that type of stuff and the structure and all. But I had a chance, obviously, to meet you and spend a little time talking to Vic, and I thought I'd give it a shot. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life, and that was my biggest interest was to be in tennis. So it didn't hurt to give it a shot. By the way, the cost of the tuition didn't hurt either, because that's a very, very low cost tuition. Out of staters were maybe a couple $1,000 a semester, and in state was, I believe, like under $500 if you're in state for a semester. I mean, it's the most reasonable way to go learn how to
with Tyler Junior College at the time. They had a very strong competitive program as well for junior college. There's not as many teams as there were certainly back in the 80s, but it was amazing how many people from all over the world were there. Not only to be in the tennis tech program, to be on the team. The team on an interim basis, I ran the program, the tennis team twice, but once for a full semester. And recollection, it was just Scott Stewart. There was 6 foreigners on the women's team in the line top 6, and then 5 out of 6 on the men's team. With so you were there, you got the degree.
Yeah, during the first year, you resigned your first year right after my midterms. You resigned, and I realized if I needed to learn, I needed to hunker down and really learn. So I got audio machine and I got tapes and started to record my class, and I recorded all my classes and all that. And
you still have that in storage?
I still have my audio tapes in storage. I didn't have a video camera, but I got a lot of audio tapes of lectures and all that, what I did. And I used to go back and rewrite all my notes late at night. I used to go to UT Tyler, and I used to lock myself in a room and just go listen and rewrite all my notes. And then I still have those, but I really wanted to learn because I never learned the game. So I really stepped in. That was a lot of thanks to my oldest brother, because my oldest brother, Keith, mentioned that to me. He said, hey, you really want to learn, go start recording your classes, go rewrite everything. And just, I wasn't a party type of person. I was very introverted, and I just wanted to learn. So I just became a bookworm and an audio tape worm, and tried to learn as much as I can from you.
To back up on the resignation, I was there during the time I was there through the 80s. There was 3 tennis coaches, and each coach each time was running both the men's and women's team. So the first time through Jennifer Roberts, who played at Illinois, she had been an assistant for Scott Perelman. She was there for 2 years, helping run the program, did so much to help the program, recommended her. And I should have known in the 80s they were not going to hire a woman to coach a men's team, but they should have hired her. Then she went on, she was a successful coach at the University of Illinois. But the second time, I just promised myself the second time, if they didn't hire someone that I had recommended, I was going to resign. And I resigned at the beginning of the year, like you said, midterms, the first semester. So then I'd have a lot of time to meet with the administration and try to have one of my former students take the program over. Because when I started that program, I was told for every 20 students I had, I would have 1 full-time faculty. And the whole time I was there, I didn't have 1 full-time faculty person. And John Peterson, he was the 3rd coach. He came in, players coach. Everybody loved him, did a great job. Be interesting to see if I think Dick Gould at Stanford, who was won 17, but national championships. Peterson's way up there with multiple titles in junior college tennis. I recommended Craig Tiley. He was there 7 years. Tiley wasn't even interviewed. So then I resigned. But I remember Peterson years later asked me, well, who did you recommend? Because at one point I was overseeing a junior college women's team. So we would see him at the junior college nationals. And he asked me, I said, well, I recommended Craig Tiley. And by that time, Craig Tiley had won, or he was on his way. I'd have to pinpoint the year. He took the team at the University of Illinois. He went in as a director of instruction, but it was just circumstantial, like so many things. As Neil Adams was the men's coach, and whether it was termination or resignation, in midstream, Tiley became the interim because Neil Adams was out. Tiley was in with Jennifer Roberts' pull. And I remember I went back and forth. I think it was Bob Todd. He also was an interim athletic director. So Tiley, he took the program, and pretty much if people weren't adhering to the standards that he was setting, they were off the team, and he even had to go to the intramural department to fill up the lineup initially. So you know Craig well, but they went from obscurity to winning the national championship. So John Peterson, he got a kick out of that. But why I wanted to have the coach be part of the program, and when we ran it for one full semester, we had every match filmed, every match charted, and it really created a really unique culture. There was so many politics with Tyler Junior College, where at one point, one of the coaches, kids were deprived of academic freedom because they were not allowed to be in the program. But I can remember, kids would, they were not, they were just innocent, naive. They would be asking the coaches questions. And not so much with Peterson, but his predecessors, where it was, you don't want to have a coach or a kid saying, "Hey, coach, can I go talk to Steve and ask him what he thinks of my forehand?" And but it should have just been open and transparent. But go ahead. So you're only there 1 year with me.
I was 1 year with you. If I recall correctly, I believe my first summer, I went back to Connecticut and I ran a country club for that first summer. But I believe the next, when I got back after the summer, that's where I believe I met with you at Willowbrook Country Club. And you had mentioned to me that you were starting up your tennis business in the area, and you had other tennis pros that you trained in the area, and you wanted me to be a part of what you were doing with the company and all. And you had David Anderson, you had Guy Weinhold. I know Charles was over at another club. I think it was Nacogdoches, if I was correct. But I know he was running Charles Jackson was running a club over there. And then you and Craig started running a program at Tyler Tennis and Swim, if I was correct.
Actually, the club's Timber Creek.
Oh, Timber Creek, that's right.
In that area, Longview is the next town over, but there was Lufkin, Nacogdoches. And we had quite a few people throughout that area because training tennis teachers for 10 years and finding jobs. Job placement was like next to 100%. It was way up there. And, all over the world. And the students were from, I'd have to look it up, over 35 states and 25 countries. But we had students in the next town over, Longview, there was 2 clubs. Just reaching
pretty far back.
No, was it Oakdale or Oakville Country Club and the Center Court Club? But anyway, they emerged. They became one club. But there was only one club, so we had a presence at 5 out of the 6 clubs. Plus, we were based out of one of the private schools too. So, I stayed there really to. You're attached to players and you want to help players get through the junior development program. And so we were there. So you worked within that private junior sector that we had business. Okay.
Yeah. I worked with David Anderson. You got me hooked up with David, and that's where I started, getting my, really starting to learn how to teach, going through my growing pains and stuff like that, and learning actually how to teach. And
well, you're fortunate because it makes sense that obviously you were very disciplined. We wanted all the students to, back in the day, it was a matter of write your notes, type your notes, and then put your notes in ring binders, plastic sheets. There was no digital work. There was no, okay, I'll sit at my laptop. Back then, the computers were the size of a refrigerator. You to register 300 students be in one line to just take your your computer card, and I'm going to take this class, and you have to get in another line.
I heard
a long time ago.
And I heard horror stories. I mean, you were on your way out. I heard horror stories during the heyday of it being really, really tough. So
well, certainly,
you definitely press people to learn.
When I started, I came in from California. I was working for Vic Braden. And I was going to go to Europe, but I had a clause in my contract if Eugene Allen could make it work out where I could go in and revise the curriculum. that I didn't have to report to the Vic Braden tennis schools in Germany. I later went to Germany many times to work for Vic. With the attendance policy, when I first came in, I was told it was recommended 6 absences and you're dropped, and 2 tardies equal 1 absence. I didn't even take attendance at first, but I, my ego is such, it's like, okay, I could see the term was, I'm going to blow off class. And I was 26 years old. So I can remember Dennis Vandermeer was in town, and certainly most of the children, I should say students, their parents were sending the checks. So they had to pay a fee to go through their preparation, say, Dennis called it Tennis University, plus take the test. And kids were sleeping in. So I went from 0 attendance policy to there was no tardies. The bell rang, the door was shut. And there was assigned seating. And if you had 6 absences, you were out. And with that, how I started each class, I'd have a student assistant, a lab instructor take attendance, but you had assigned seating. It's just amazing where you get all your different ideas. At Texas A&M, I trained tennis teachers at Texas A&M. They were no longer there, but they had all these intramural courts. I think they had 24. But each court had a wooden backboard in the back of it. And it's pretty easy to remember. It was 24 courts and 24 numbers on each backboard. I remember asking, why are those numbers on the backboard? And the instructor said, so we can take attendance faster. So the teacher blows whistle, everybody lines up, and if nobody's standing in front of 19, 19's absent, boom, let's go hit balls. And boy, that was impressive. But to start class, we had a name pulled out of the hat. You had to come in front of the class, stand in front of the camera, and you'd be asked a question. It was based on the last class or your homework, because teaching is information and presentation. And if you didn't know, you would just say, where do you get the 450 degrees on the serve? You'd have to look at the camera and say, I'm not sure we get the 450 degrees on the serve, but I will find out. And then you sit down and the next person would come up. So yeah, it was a little tight. I know the perception was tennis teaching was, we were one step above underwater basket weaving. So I went out of my way to make it where we broke that barrier where, no, this is not going to be an easy degree.
You succeeded.
But what was very interesting when I resigned, and I was there a full year, resigned in the fall, and I dropped the attendance policy because I knew I had to be there, because if someone was dropped from a class, I had, the power is a very strong word, but as the department head, had the power to let a kid substitute, but I wouldn't let them do that. So say, for example, they missed a class, scientific principles to tennis teaching. If they were bumped from that because of attendance, they had to come back the next semester when it was taught. I wasn't going to let them substitute that with an elective. What happened with most students is they couldn't get through the accounting. Obviously, you got the degree. So the 2 accounting classes, we finally had one instructor who had the accounting class be a pro shop, a book of sales where you had lessons and you're selling shoes and stringing rackets. But back in those days, it was a ledger sheet. It was no computer. But congrats to you, because so many people didn't graduate, a very high percentage. But on the flip side of that, a number of people took all the tennis classes. But also, too, there's many people that already had a degree, whether it was undergraduate or master's. There's people that had retired from the military, or they were making a career change from the business world. With certainly that second year had to be different.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Paul Solis came in for your place, and he definitely didn't have the knowledge. I'll just be very diplomatic about that one. He didn't have the same knowledge, but it was helpful for me because I was teaching and just hanging in and doing courses and making sure I had the degree. So I graduated in 91. And then,
Yeah,
but I worked in the area with you and with indirectly through you, with you and with David through 91, I believe.
Paul Solis, I believe, is from San Antonio, and his background is obviously a very good amateur player. I think he played in college. He was involved. I know he was involved with college camps. He would have had to had the academic credentials to be hired. But in all fairness to him, the administrators, I had to tell them, you need to hire someone who's been through the program. Actually, he was taking some shots at me through an interview with Eugene Scott's Tennis Weekly. It used every week his tennis magazine would come out, and there was an article on, at that time, Tyler Junior College and Fair State. They were the only two. Methodist College came in a little bit later, and he said, well, the program was one-dimensional, and by doing that, it was all written that Vic Braden was one-dimensional. And really, it wasn't that. It was just the opposite, where we had a different speaker every month, so 9 per year. PTR and USPTA every time. We had, in addition to speakers, and I say speakers, we would have easily 100 pros visit. That sounds like a large number of it. You have an entire school year. And we had over 100. It grew to where we had the largest class was 108 students, or a 2-year program. But people would come in and run a 25-hour workshop. Peter Burwash, Jack Ruppel, Jim Lair, John Verdi, going on Jim Burdick, Scotty Perelman, who was on not too long ago as a guest. So Guy Weinhold, it's interesting. His daughter became the #1 junior in the United States. I never worked with her until she was in the 18s. So, but they were like yourself. I know we'll get on to that. You had the opportunity to work for Vic Braden. Guy and Lisa Weinhold, they met in the program, married. Their daughter Ashley, she started in gymnastics, and you're a pretty good tennis player if you become #1 junior. I could just go on and on like about her story. I remember she had a slight regress palm up at the bottom of her serve. And then Andy Roddick came on the scene. Everybody's talking about having an abbreviated serve. And the Bradenisms, the speed of the backswing has nothing to do with the power supply. And Andy, a story has been told, we have a film of him where his mother used the term, his serve was pitiful. He had a regress palm up. And out of frustration, and he was working with Stan Bosted, who I had a chance to meet. He was at USTA. I remember traveling with my son, and Stan was working with my son. And Andy tells the story. He just put the racket right here in the salute position out of frustration, and he just started hitting some serves. And he says now, he goes, and that's what I did for the next 15 years. It had obviously one of the best serves in tennis. But all of a sudden Ashley had this regress palm up at the top of her motion. And I remember telling Guy that he needed to get back involved with her tennis, which he did. Just think of management, just with her tennis. I remember setting up with Michael Center, the coach at Texas, and say, he said, yeah, I'll do it. And we trained her. She was, came to work with us several times, and trying to teach her how to chart matches, because she didn't play aggressive enough off the backhand side. She had a beautiful 2-handed backhand, but she hit a lot of underspin backhands. And underspin backhand it's a trick question. What's better, topspin or underspin? Which shot lands deeper? And but yet hitting a passing shot, sometimes you just got to strike that ball at topspin. And she was very athletic, and she could volley, get in more, be managed by stats. And I'm going to guess that she got to be 150 in the world. People say, well, that's a hell of a run. She was a very good tennis player. Charles Jackson. So many blasts from the past. But no, you would have been brought into the inner circle with those coaches at the 5 out of 6 clubs because of how you were dedicated to your first year. But coming back again to Paul Solis's successor, he. Someone really had to be very adverse, with Van Horn method, the Vandermeer methodology, methodology, and on. Jacobson, anybody who's really studied the GreatBase content, it's amazing how many critics we have. And, I mean, I could share story after story. There's one UST national coach that told a gal that we trained, became very, very good, told the parents that you need to use a blend of methods. The GreatBase is too one-dimensional, but she just didn't know. I mean, the GreatBase is a blend of methods, and it's certainly, to call Vic Braden one-dimensional, that backfired. And I remember Dave Anderson and Craig Tiley, they contacted John Peterson, and the enrollment was going down, and through that, Dave Anderson was offered the job to go and run Tennis Tech, just based on what transpired with the criticism of Braden through Tennis Weekly. Go ahead. What else is up on the Richard Bodian journey?
Well, after that, I met Hubert Karash when I was at Dave's. I eventually, I believe it was after 91, I went back to Connecticut and ran a couple health clubs, couple tennis facilities at two different clubs. Hubert actually contacted me. He broke his hand and he wanted to come and do some training with me up in Connecticut. So he came up and I worked a little bit with his game, and then we traveled the Canadian circuit together. And I know Hubert met David Anderson through a prize money tournament that he was running. And then David started helping out Hubert, I believe, and Hubert did some teaching for David from my knowledge, but I'm not 100% certain. But I know that I spent some time with Hubert. And then after Hubert, we went over and we went to the Italian satellite, and then that's when he decided to stop playing. And then we came back. Hubert went back to Canada, and then I was at home. My dad was very ill of Alzheimer's, and my dad passed after I had gone through this with Hubert, and then I'll never forget it. It was a very early morning. I don't remember which day. I think it was a Friday, if I'm correct, but it was like 7 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. I get a phone call. I'm down in the basement in the house I grew up, because I was there for my dad, helping my mom and my dad, and when he passed. And then you call with an opportunity to come help you and come teach with you over in Rochester, New York, with Midtown Tennis Club.
With let me interrupt. Hubert Crash, mother's Japanese, father's German, grew up in Canada. I believe he was a finalist in Junior Wimbledon. He could play. Now, when David met him, David was hosting the tournament. And back in those days, there's not as many of these as there used to be. I guess you could say with the UTR there is, but it was a money tournament, no ATP, no WTA points. But a lot of people would come out of the woodwork if there's money being played. I remember the first time I saw a money tournament, no connection to pro tennis. It was at the Boca Hotel. It was a little bit more than the tournament David was hosting in East Texas, Longview, Texas. But Hubert was he was in the lineup at University of Texas, and this is a good story for people making changes in their game. So the story goes, there's two sides to it, is that David plays Hubert and beats him. And David, his recollection, I'm pretty sure he would say that was before he just played him, and then he told me he needed to make changes in his game. Hubert would say that David had to make all these changes in his game, and then he played him and beat him. But the one thing about Hubert is he maintained his position. He totally changed his game. Now, he had a little problem with that forehand where the shoulder would pinch because he had a continental. I certainly could relate to that, where I got my grip further over, but I still had a late contact point with my upper arm glued to my upper body and my shoulder hitting my chin. I mean, it's amazing where you could look at tennis players and go, well, I've seen this problem 1,000 times. So he had problems on that, and also to the serve. But yeah, I can remember he was traveling with Jamison Hawthorne, funny guy. He went to Illinois to play for Craig, and just to let you know how Tiley had to climb the ladder, Jameson was a good player, but he was ranked number 1 in the second division. He wasn't in what was called super champs. He was in champs. Because when Tyler first went to Illinois, I mean, he wasn't talking to highly national ranked players. He's talking to players that had respectable sectional rankings. In Texas tennis, certainly a cut above most of the 17 sections in the USTA. Now, because I was running Seguso Bassett in Boca, and I remember Hubert was with you. You guys were running errands, but in the morning practice, Jameson Hawthorne shows up and he's serving, and people thought he had a pretty big serve, and he was serving to an 18-year-old Vince Spadia. So Hubert comes out in the afternoon, and because Jameson, funny guy, he could serve much better than Hubert. He said, "Hubert, you're done. You're done." I said, he goes, "This teenager, Vince, you got to serve against him." He goes, "Your serve's going to be lunch." But no, with Hubert, you got a phone call. We'll talk about your phone call taken to Rochester, New York. Hubert's mother being Japanese. I believe Hubert at one time as an amateur was ranked number 1 in Japan. He was
either that or Canada.
Not in Canada. In Canada, he was on the Davis Cup team in Canada, but he never played. He was on the roster.
Got it.
So, I mean, he's a really good tennis player. So at one time he was number 1 in the ITF. So it's a good story for people that are thinking about changing strokes. Ry Tarpley, who we told at 27 years old, right, he's trying to play pro tennis. I said, "You want to be the best 35-year-old in America?" He wasn't playing tournaments at 35. He's been a guest on our podcast. He was number 1 in the U.S. in the 40s. But Hubert was number 1 in the ITF 35s. And so he went to Japan. They have corporate leagues and such. And American kids should know more about the European club system and, corporate leagues in Asia. But he got hooked up where he worked for the in Chiba, right outside of Tokyo, the tennis training center that's was put together by Munihiro Yoshida. So then through that experience, I spent a lot of time in Japan. But I did a number of things with Hubert. But I would say Dave Anderson started the work, but you did the bulk of the work of him changing his strokes.
Yeah, I remember. Completely remember getting him a bowling brace with his left hand and securing his left hand to an Eastern and just tightening it up tight as I could be. And he was kneeling down and he was just hitting on a tennis mate over and over and over again, just trying to get onto an Eastern and just trying to get the feel for it. But coincidentally, I later found out after I spent time with Hubert that Hubert was also at Junior Wimbledon the year I was at Wimbledon in '86. When I went through and I saw the Israeli Davis Cup team go through, and I wasn't anywhere involved in tennis at that time. But I later found out, Hubert and I were sitting down and chatting one day, and I said, "Well, I was in Israel and I went to Wimbledon in 1986. He says, "Really? I was there too." And I go, "What do you mean?" "Well, I was in Junior Wimbledon that year, and I had the yearbook." So I went back and I looked back in the draw. He says, "Yeah, that's where I am." So I never would have been able to even help Hubert or be involved in tennis in that manner. Obviously, unless I went to learn how to teach the game, unless I went to Tyler, and then all the connections happened. But anyway,
Pierre Lamarche, he's been in tennis forever. He's a little older than I am. He was running in London, Ontario, a program called the All Canadian Tennis Academy, and he had people from all over the world in London, Ontario. It's pretty impressive to have some Aussies or some New Zealanders come from the other side of the world, and they're going to go to London, Ontario. I mean, usually people go where the sun shines. But actually, for our listeners, Richard was a fan of the Tennis Mate before I was, so he introduced the Tennis Mate to me. The Tennis Mate in the U.S. it was made in North Carolina. People know the GreatBase backboard or a portable backboard. They look at our first clip, I think the clip with the most views, where we are showing how to use the GreatBase backboard. I say very clearly, I'm not the mastermind of this teaching device. Actually, the French Tennis Federation and the Swedish Tennis Federation at one time were making it mandatory for their players to have them. It's a device where it has a 45-degree approximately incline. You can hit 40 balls in a minute. I mean, whether you're a really good 12-year-old or an ATP player, but it's just great for footwork, great to have a vertical swing. So it was 10 years afterwards. I mean, I can remember having like 25 of those in stock and made it, wasn't selling them for any profit, but just told the juniors, garage, carport, wherever, you could hit so many balls against it. Why don't you say a few things? I know people would be interested. I know Rob Krychek, father of Austin Krychek, he still has the original tennis mate. Tell us a little bit about the differences, how it's a little more sophisticated than.
Yeah, the original tennis mate, the main body of it was a molded piece of plastic, and you can actually angle the canvas on it because you can tilt it in any direction you wanted to. It came with a certain size leg, but really the center portion of it, you can raise it. You can take pegs out of it or pins out of it, and you can raise it and lower it if you wanted to. And then you can also take a pin out, and then you can tilt the backboard. Like you said, it was 45 degrees, but you can get it completely level if you wanted to. And on the top portion where the metal bar was, where it caught the ball, that had another plastic device that was molded. And I still have one, by the way. I have two of them. But you can lower the bar down and you can attach it because it had Velcro, and you can attach the bar to two pieces of Velcro. Instead of it catching, you attach the metal piece to the to the vinyl, basically the canvas, and then you can adjust the angle. So you can do tabletop volleys. You can practice volleys off of it. If you adjusted the angle and you wanted to work approach shots, you can work approach shots where it kicked back and then it would land, and you can practice tabletop approach shots. So you could do a lot of things with it. I also, because I'm a kind of creative kind of person, I got longer legs for it and raised it higher just to give a higher air target and try to lift more.
And a different bounce as well.
In a different bounce. The original one came with a wooden 2x4, like a 2x4 type of thing, where when the ball came down, the ball would bounce off the wood and it would pop up. You didn't necessarily need to do that on a hard court, but this was made to take to the beach or go into, if you were going to go to a tournament and you had one of these, within 5 minutes, you have it set up and you can practice your, warm up for a match, and you can adjust. You can warm up your volleys. You can warm up your ground stroke. Yeah. If you wanted to serve into it, you can serve. So you can use it as a warm up, but you could take it anywhere you wanted to. The only thing it didn't have was like a carrying case. If you had a nice carrying case with it, and then you could just carry it, toss it in the car, take it to a tournament, take it to the beach, start practicing and playing whenever, wherever you wanted.
If it was like a beach or like say just the backyard, an uneven playing field. So if it was, it's 4 feet wide, 6 feet high. So the board was 4 by 2 inches by 2 inches thick, 4 inches wide.
Very well designed. I mean, I would do some modifications, if I were to take it and say, hey, I want to do this, I'd probably make longer legs or do some modifications to it. But I'll tell you what, that the original tennis mate is pretty well thought out. It's pretty well thought out to do a lot of things.
Yeah, tennis was so big back in the day. You could go to a pro shop and they would have a tennis mate if you're trying new rackets. They weren't rare.
I used to hit with it in the basement.
I wouldn't say they were everywhere, but it wasn't a rarity. But the board be angled, so when it would come down the 45-degree incline, it would hit the board that had the reverse angle. So for a beginner, the ball would pop straight up and it wouldn't have a rebound. It made it easier to get it going for beginners. So it was very well thought out.
Yeah, and I believe the closest one to the original tennis mate right now, I believe it's called Tri-Tennis. There's one over in Europe called Tri-Tennis.
Yeah.
And it's a longer, if you get the extended version, looked really good because it's set pretty low and it had a very high, it looked pretty good.
Yeah, the gentleman put that together is in Holland, and I was in not too far away in Dusseldorf with a junior, and I said, hey, let's make a day trip and we'll purchase one of these. And he tried to say that he was the mastermind behind it. And I was told, I don't know if it's true, but the Swedes, they called it the tennis partner, the Americans, the tennis mate. And one of the problems they had, why they quit being produced, was the patent war. I remember talking to Seth McKinley, somebody I'd met through, I don't really know that well, but I know Bobby McKinley well, and he's been with Babolat forever, and I said, that would be great to have that big canvas say Babolat, but there was no patent. I really think that someone like Larry Ellison, who's done so much for tennis, is, it just should be subsidized where they should be everywhere. There's a problem outside. It's like a sailboat. You got to set them down. But then also too is that through creativity, I know that people have made them around the world that we basically gave away the directions free of charge. But to just, even from a fence, just with S hooks and create a way to, where a player can just instant backboard. One thing is backboards are not even being built these days. But yeah, thanks for introducing us to and being a fan of. It's really helped so many kids.
Create the vertical swing and the numbers of hits, and as long as you're not scooping it, as long as you're using your legs and you're hitting up on the ball. And
there's other versions. I was a little disappointed when we first put it out. Jeff Lewis, with the help of his dad, put the backboard together, and people I think know. A lot of people know Jeff. Just go to Jeff Lewis Tennis. He puts a lot of great content on YouTube. That when it first came out, is you got to use it. You got to use it, and with but people contacted us they wanted us to make money off of it, and I was really disappointed by that. But within the first year after Jeff put it together, six companies just here in the U.S. 6 people were selling it, and even more worldwide. But no, it's a great training tool. So tell us, Rochester, New York. So I called you up. Tell us your beginning steps there in your journey.
Well, you have plenty of stories. I should probably put that ball on your court over there. I went there just to teach tennis, just to go in there and do whatever I needed to do and teach, and obviously learn more by being around you, because this was really my first formal opportunity to teach with you. So, but the big thing really over there with you is learning. I never knew how to do video analysis, and we had a very archaic way of doing video analysis and everything like that. But to record somebody's strokes and then document it, but then re-record it and explain what they're doing and all that type of stuff. That was a little bit of a learning process for me. Obviously, the education that I had was helpful, but that was definitely that was a nice area of development for me, and indirectly helping others learn how to teach because of my knowledge of the game and working hand in hand with you. Helping other teachers at the facility, get better and learn how to teach.
Well.
Opens up a big can of worms talking about Midtown Tennis, Rochester.
I have total recall. I recall totally what I want to. I didn't want to bring someone in. I wanted to try to turn it around with a staff that I inherited. A lot of in communication, a lot of the people working there, they thought they were going to make 50% at the lowest, shooting to get 60% of a $50 lesson. But the lesson, this goes back in time, you just talk about the numbers, but it was 25 for the court and 25 for the lesson. So people were getting $12.50 an hour. They were getting 50% starting out. So I had some unhappy campers, but there were 25 coaches, and I said, well, I didn't set policy. I'm here. And I said, but what I did, I had 3 former students that worked there. They all told me, don't work there. Don't take the job. But being from upstate New York, it's like, okay, I think everybody in some ways likes to go back home. And TC at that time, I think it was 55 clubs. Alan Schwartz, I believe Alan's in the International Tennis Hall of Fame. He passed away. I didn't really get to know him that well, but I certainly met him several times. Very charismatic and Yale graduate, played tennis at Yale, tennis lifer, and became a very successful businessman. The person that we dealt with was Doug Cash. He was the chief operating officer, or maybe the chief executive officer. He was a big guy, large and in charge. And so I took the job and I said, I'll take it, but the first 30 days, I don't want to teach. I just want to observe. And I observed, and we should go through that in more detail. I could just write a book just on that initial start. So the first, did have a meeting every week. First meeting, I just basically said, okay, hello, nice to meet you. Go around the room and tell me a little bit about yourself. Second meeting, I told them a little about me, myself. And, the third meeting, I just wasn't going to have anything concrete in the meetings until the fourth meeting. And by the fourth meeting with 25 pros, what I did is I just took 4 from each person, 4 things that they were drastically teaching that was wrong. And I said, well, we're going to close the lessons down and we're going to have a very long meeting. And, ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And, I could even tell the stories about the people that went through that they were upset about what they were earning. But I said, well, I can help you out with what you're learning. But I was brought in. Doug Cash told me years later, I mean, he's a briefcase guy and I'm a ball hopper guy. People could just look him up, Cash Flow Tennis. He helps tennis clubs become profitable. And I mean, he has a very deep history in that side of the business. So with, you came in, but during those first 30 days, I filmed everyone. I skill tested everyone. And 2 pros that never worked there when I was there. Think of Paul Lobben from South Africa, who was a good player. Roy Coopersmith, never met him either. But they supposedly, I don't know if punches were thrown, but they brought me in because the pro staff wasn't getting along. So those 2 guys, I was told that they came to push and shove and a few punches were thrown. So if it was a hockey game, that'd be okay. But I don't think that's what you need to have in a meeting of teaching pros. Years later, Craig Webster, Craig Webster, South African. He used to always bring juniors over. At that time, I stopped really playing tennis when I was 27. I knocked some balls around, but I was at Tyler Junior College and I'm training. I'm good enough to beat guys, definitely the lower guys on the team. And I just, wait a minute, I'm going to the gym, I'm running, because that was the thing when you're a young guy in your 20s is and you were talking about they were all really at that time Division I tennis players at Tyler Junior College. I would say that I'd have to really work it out, but like say Craig Tiley at Illinois or John Peterson and some of his predecessors, Tyler Junior College, not to the point where they got out to Kevin Anderson and getting to the Wimbledon final and US Open final, but I would say equally impressive how many kids from Tyler Junior College were, getting to be like 200, 250 in the world. But so I just came to the crossroads of, wait a minute, I'm not here to hit balls. I'm here to develop tennis teachers. But with going to Rochester, New York, I actually, years later, came across a photo. Now, Lobben would have been in the 18s, and I would have been like 22 years old. And I actually played him in a doubles tournament. And we were on the winning side, this English guy I played with. But, years go by, and people just take shots. Who's a new guy in town? Who's a new sheriff in town? Years later, my son Connor, he went to Rochester, New York, and Greg Yohaya was on the staff. And he was still there all the years later, and said, "Hey, I want you to do me a favor and be my son's coach." And he won both the singles and doubles at this pro tournament in Rochester. But no, there was so many things. But what Doug Cash told me that I was brought in, and it made it enticing where I could train tennis teachers for 55 clubs and make an impact on American tennis. Okay, that sounds right up my alley. But and then Doug said later that he didn't think that what I was doing could be replicated unless I was there. Like someone else wasn't going to match that effort. But that's a topic for debate. But so you came in and your skill set. Back in the day, listeners, we had people. If you ever get stopped by a police officer and you get a speeding ticket, you roll through a stop sign, whatever, and the officer has a professional clipboard, and inside that clipboard is going to be grip stickers, a couple teaching aids, definitely a profile sheet, the goal sheet. Any upcoming flyers, going to be organized.
Yeah, that was another learning scenario for me going there and having all this, having all that structure. So,
yeah, I've been in the lane of training tennis teachers, tennis parents, tennis players for so long, but I was allowed to have an office, a big office room renovated, and everybody had it. You didn't have your own desk, but communal desk, but you had a locker, not a locker like an athlete's locker, and every person had to have a Rolodex. Every person had to have okay, let me sit down, let me see your telephone log, and there was a telephone system that was quite elaborate, and I remember at that time my boys were really young, but the coaches were always saying, he left me 25 messages yesterday. He left me a message at 4:45 in the morning, and but no, it was interesting what it turned around in 2 years at that facility. I think that's how we could let our listeners know how you got a chance to work for Vic Braden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from there, again, the backstory more than I do, again, on that, but you basically let me know that, that you were moving on, and I basically, you can get me set up to work with Vic, and I can either stay in the corporation and teach there, but it's not what you recommended, or you'd set me up to go volunteer my time with Vic. It was really to go volunteer and kind of, help out. And you just set me up with an opportunity to be around Vic. And,
how that happened, egos, the macho male ego. And we have a young player you were helping today. He's 6'5". I think the first time I heard this line was from David Anderson. So I have stole at least one of Anderson's lines. Is that so you meet the guy 6'5", and you and I get along well. My ego's 6'6". But so the macho male ego was Glenn William, who had been very successful. There's Glenn William, the player, a senior player. This is Glenn William, the general manager, who it's a really nice facility in Midland, Michigan. He was the GM there, but he came in to work at TCA. And, we did have some Steve stories up, and we need to come back to that. But one story is, it involves you, and is that he comes in and he's walking around the facility and he watches you teach tennis. And he just says to me, you got to get rid of that guy. Headhunting. You got to chop that off. We can't have someone teaching tennis in this building that way. And I just listened, and he's the GM. I'm the tennis director. So as we walked around the facility, so then I had a chance to go back to the office. Without talking to you, I called up Braden, and I said, "Hey, you got to do me a favor, please, please, please. This guy's just so dedicated. He has studied your contributions to tennis, Vic, backwards and forwards. And this is what just happened. Someone watched him teach tennis for a few minutes and told me I got to get rid of him. So then Doug Cash came to town. So then I'm the tennis director, you get the GM, and then you get the COO, Chief Operating Officer. And he goes, what happened with Bodian? I said, no, he's leaving. Then he said, why is he leaving? And I said, Glenn was in the meeting. I said, Glenn told me to get rid of him. And then Doug looked at it because you were walk at profit center for them. So if you were teaching 50, I would guess you were teaching 55. If you're teaching 55 hours a week, whatever you were making, they were making. So if you say, okay, for simple math back then, if you were making $70,000, they were making $70,000. And there goes $70,000 walking away. And I just remember they said, well, where's he going to go work? I said, he's going to go work for Braden. But with that, Kodak supported, Kodak, they didn't switch. I remember when I started, a guy named Fisher was the CEO. Like the same time I came in as a tennis director. And, by tennis industry standards, I was well paid, and this would be your bonus. And I'm thinking, okay. But I said, I can do a traveling clinic, and my bonus would be a little bit more than that. But that was, then I think the whole mentality with TC at that time is people wanted to get off the court and not be a tennis director, but be a general manager. And that's the last thing I wanted to do. But with that, to go in and we say changing a tennis culture is like turning an ocean liner on a dime. But so those 30 days to have everybody filmed, everybody skill tested, then meet with the pros, and they basically, that's just the industry norm to this day. Very nice people, but in our world, you only know the grips, tennis math, turn the racket 8 times. I mean, people must get tired of hearing this. Turn the racket 8 times. 45 degrees. You turn it 8 times, it's 360 degrees in a circle. 8 panels to the racket. Every time you change that knuckle by 1 panel, it's 45 degrees. I always say, Arthur Ashe Stadium is 23,000 seats. How many people who love tennis that are in that stadium could answer that question? I remember telling John Embry, to Mark Twain, he was in charge of the USPTA, and I flew in and made a trip just to talk about having the USPTA have a Vic Braden course. In all fairness to John, who's retired now, he told me to go through the board, the UST board. I said, I could learn, like, Mark Twain, every time you meet someone, you meet your master. But I could learn from every person in the USPTA. But I said, at best, I could ask a handful of questions, and only a handful of pros within the entire organization, the USPTA, would be able to organize those or be able to answer those. Like, how wide is a tennis court? It's 36, 27, but where do you get the 19.1 degrees? And the Braden theme that I have people say it weekly. New people come in and we have to make a point. The dimensions of the court and physical laws dictate stroke production. No coach's opinion or any unique theory. I remember the first time Vic heard me have a group of people recite that, he thought it was so funny. His brain type being a P, me versus being a J, that wasn't really his style. Everybody repeat after me. But that's how you got introduced to going to Vic. How's it go? And I was with the Polish juniors, Vitek Miras, I guess it was 1981. There was martial law in Poland. And I'm in this Miami hotel. There's a pounded door. And I open the door, and there's this huge camera, ABC Even News, and, the 2 or 3 people with the person with a microphone. The only person who didn't go back, all the kids stayed and were placed in homes, and all of them went on to play college tennis. But Vitek Miras, he was asked, and he spoke perfect English. In fact, he spoke 6 languages. I remember going around and saying, okay, what's that coach saying? What's that coach saying? What's that coach saying? Because being an American, speak 1 language. If you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. You speak 2 languages, you're bilingual. You speak 1 language, you're American. So anyway, this ABC crew comes in, and he was asked if he's going to go back, and he looked right at the camera and he said, when the ship's going down, the rats are the first ones to leave. So I stayed and just met with every pro and said, well, because they were not going to be allowed to teach what they had been taught. That's been part of your whole journey, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
with, I guess one more thing about the GM, and he's retired now, and he did a great job. And when you go in, it's like a tennis director. I don't want to come across where it's all just forehands and backhands. If that's the lane you're in, that's the lane you're in. And I think a lot of times people should just get in one lane and be good at it. A tennis director, they've got to be a greeter, they've got to be an event coordinator. Psychologist, they have to, a teacher, they have to do from A to Z, an accountant. So it was Dave Bone, sharp guy. I remember he came in, he was being interviewed, and he said, well, he's a graduate of Ferris State. And I looked at him, give a knee-jerk reaction. I said, well, I started Ferris State. And he knew I didn't. He looked at me. And I said, no, indirectly. I said, Tyler Junior College was first. Ferris State was second. So, but he was a very sharp off-court guy. He had passed his USPTA test, and then he found out that, he went 4 years at Ferris State, but he found out that he had learned a lot about the tennis industry, but not a lot about, as we would say, the X's and O's and the nuts and bolts of tennis. We meet people all the time that, hey, that person knows a lot about tennis, but there's something that's missing. They just don't know the tennis math. And then Willie Schutte. So one was the administrative coordinator. I think for the resume, we would call him the administrative director and the social director. Coffee with Willie. So I know you guys became buddies, spent a lot of time together.
Yeah, we actually lived together.
So Schutte.
We rented our house together and stayed with each other.
That's right. He was the odd couple.
Yeah. Yeah, we were definitely odd. We're definitely opposites.
No, he'd be a great guest on this podcast. So he got out of tennis, but tennis, he would tell you that the time that, he was grinding in Rochester certainly taught him principles for life, right? So I knew this was happening. In fact, you and I were talking about it, and one of the parents, he's here, he lives right next to Midland, Michigan, or he's familiar with the facility all these years later. So this is just what happens: is the GM came in and he didn't like what he saw that I was doing, and meanwhile I was just 2 years into it, and you got to knock down the shack to build the estate. You inherit. Well, this is where the program was. One time told an academic dean, he told me, you're rocking the boat. I said, I can't rock the boat. The boat's underwater. And he looked at me and said, you should be a Baptist minister. So anyway, I knew the meeting was coming. It was the corporate shuffle. Because Bone and Schutte, they certainly would have been geared more towards, moving up the ladder, and it all comes down to you got to survive, and the managers were paid more than the directors. So when Glenn William came back, told the story, just haven't told in years, but told the story before. So he was coming back after he'd been there a couple of days. He coming back with his family. So I called him up and I said, hey, you got little kids, I got little kids. You're coming. You won't be able to get in the morning session at the Montessori school, but you'll be able to get in the afternoon session. And I said, I'll set it up for you. I said, why don't we do this? Is that you can buy the club with your wife. And at that time I'm married. And I said, I'm dinner or lunch at the snack bar at the club, 2 wives. And during that time, your kids can have lunch, but we'll give them a 30-minute tennis lesson. And then we'll go together to the Montessori program. And he says, yes. And I go, we got him. So anyway, Raul Ramundo helped you out. And so you're the guy. So Bodian, he had the skill set. So these 2 girls are coming in, and they're young kids. I would guess 6 and 8. Maybe even younger, because of Montessori, it would have been maybe 5 and 7, young. But they had played tennis. They were tennis players. They went to the program the dad managed. And, I think all these years later is that, Doug Cash, I remember him telling Glenn William after I left, he said, tennis will never be taught the way it was taught in this building again, meaning the level of competency. So you have a helper, you got Raul to film, but I said, just the forehand, only got 30 minutes, film their old forehand and film their new forehand, pre and post, 30 minutes. And again, Kodak, everything was on VHS. Remember, we had a large room and people, this large commercial club. It was 16 indoor courts at one time. A lot of members, and people had their own videotape. And that's how you get all the coaches on the same page. Is you make them get in front of the camera and they have to critique strokes. So there's finally a meeting, and Glenn has met with Dave and he's met with Willie, and they're going to tell me, hey, we need to change how we're doing things from a tennis teaching standpoint. So I listened to him and briefly and said, okay, but before we really get into this deep, I said, and we did in this classroom that I was allowed to design. The tennis court's 120 by 60. So they gave us 40 by 60. No, they took 40 by 60 to make it a cardio. So we had the remainder. They took 40. So we had 80 by 60, and I developed Vic Braden lanes. We had the approval from Vic. We have 3 Vic Braden lanes, modified, but 3 Vic Braden lanes. It was pretty creative how the area was set up. And to digress, a year later, they knocked it down again and made it all cardio, all 7,200 square feet. So you go down to the tennis teaching area, and get it done. So I have the VHS. I get the pre-post. It's in my shoulder bag in the meeting place. It's William, Bone, and Shooty. And I said, guys, before we go any further, let's just watch this tape. And it's on a cycle. And, you say the way we did it was archaic. It's true. We shot film off of film. But at the same time, it was innovative because nobody else was doing it. Nobody was making take-home tapes at that time. I mean, tell me somebody who was doing that.
Yeah, nobody was doing that.
And narrated slow motion analysis. How that was set up is I was running an academy, Seguzo Bassett, and overnight we were the 3rd largest academy. People were coming to Florida to see Saddlebrook, to see Bollettieri's, and see Seguzo Bassett. I'm thinking, okay, I need to have them have some retention. So it's like we just shot film off of film. I learned a lot from George Wilson at Tyler Junior College, who's in charge of AV, audiovisual, the AV department. So anyway, Glenn is watching this. And I just told Shooty and Bone, you guys, you should. It just said right openly, I know you're very capable. I said, you should have known better, guys. But he looked at the tape. I'm going to look again. Look again. And he looks at the tape and he goes, those are my kids. I said, exactly. I said, we have to have another meeting. And this time your wife has to come. Like, how are we going to teach your daughters? The old way or the new way? And, prevention of injury. And, I could go on. I really could do that with Dave Anderson. I've talked about taking the time at Seguzo Bassett. You go in as a group of us. We went to Tennis Memphis. We say, okay, we go in and just only one time in tennis. And by the time I sold it was just 4 tennis courts. But you better own the place if you really want to do what you want to do. But tell us about working for Vic.
Yeah. After Rochester, I believe I went up to Richmond Hill Country Club for a couple of weeks just to help you out a little bit. And then I took a trip over the Vics.
He prepped.
Yeah.
Even though you didn't need it. That's my J. Let's prep this guy some more.
Yeah. And then I went over the Vics. And again, I was there to volunteer. And
but you worked eventually.
Eventually, yeah. What happened is I went there above the classroom, and you know this very well. Above the
coach's
classroom.
room.
Yep. Above the classroom, you got the coach's room, and you have not all of it, but you had a lot of the old film that Vic shot. And you just have rows and rows of film up there. And I don't know, I had like a pad. It wasn't a real bed, but there was like a pad on the floor, and that's what I slept on. So I slept above the classroom.
When I was there, I lived in a van.
So it was a step up almost.
Yeah, yeah.
But I went there. You set me up to be around the best, and Vic's the best. I roughed it. I roughed it out over there. I listened to Vic do lectures, and then I recall the hitting lanes, which you know a lot about. I was over there and I was hanging out with Raphael. Raphael was the maintenance guy.
Yeah, he's passed away now. Great guy.
Yeah, he was a great, phenomenal guy. Really nice. And I was up there and I was helping Raphael in the hitting lanes, with the balls and everything, making sure everything's running right and all that. And then, and I start saying to Raphael, I go, that guy needs an Eastern. That guy's on a Continental. That guy's on the wrong grip. He's got too big of a swing. I'm starting to pinpoint all the major flaws. And it goes, Raphael goes, you really got to start work. You got to really work. You got to work here, Richard. So maybe he mentioned something to Vic. And then next thing I know, they were like, Raphael said, I just knew too much just to volunteer my time and just, but within a week or two, I was working at the college.
One thing with Mike McLaughlin, I've got a few things on the desk here that Mike brought to me. He was just here a week ago. He was on the staff. Obviously, you didn't cross paths with him. Usually with Mike Valentine, who also was on staff and would also sing that song, Vic is the best. But I can remember, being on the court and doing something, like say it would be Vandermeer related with progressions or definitely Van Horn balance. I remember one time Vic just sitting on the deck, watching me. I think, well, I wonder what he's thinking. And he just wanted to know everything about Welby Van Horn. And actually, when Mike had so much to do with Vic's widow Melody, and Vic kept records of everything. And there was some confrontation from 1984 on. Other than Luke Wickham, who we got to get on the podcast, great guy from Iowa, funny guy, sharp guy. So Luke, cool hand Luke, he was not trained by me, but once he started running Vic Braden Orlando. But once he was hired, he spent an enormous amount of time with me, and then he hired people that I had trained. But so that was someone who I didn't train beforehand. But from 84 on, every head pro he had, I had trained. So one thing with Vic, what's in those files is a lot of the pros from Germany, Americans that went to be based in Germany. Just like you mentioned, Paul Solis, they didn't have enough time with Vic. They weren't really well prepared. Vic wouldn't want to hear the word method, but they didn't have a really deep understanding. There's different levels to everything. And that's where these freshmen, sophomores would go to the Vic Braden schools in Germany. And certainly they can make all sorts of mistakes, which they did. But overall, we just came out, or I came up with the phrase, don't be a tennis tech monster. You can learn from everybody. When you go, just because the person you're working for says something that's wrong, that doesn't mean that you can't learn from that person. But the people it was pretty much straight across the board. The people that went over, like that would have been yourself when you showed up, your level of competency would have been higher than so many people that were on the staff. You said earlier before we went on air, one assignment you had one time was be able to tell the differences between Tennis for the Future and then Tennis 2000. We hope to interview, Jeff Lewis has set that up. Recently had a reunion. He talked to Bill Bruns, who's written all the books, and he told Jeff he'd love to be a guest on a podcast. But there were definitely differences. Mm-hmm. One was Vic, it was very new, the two-handed backhand. It was 2 forehand grips. And, then Vic, in the book, it was Robert Nerschel with tennis elbow was a backhand grip. And Vic, years later, I mean, he knows that the pros on the bottom hand, they're continental. Because I hypertrophy the expansion of the muscles in the left forearm. Basically, the two-handed backhand for righty is a left-handed forehand. But when you're teaching developmental tennis, you want to teach like Vic. Vic the man would tell you the grip, the backhand grip is on the right side of one. Vic the resource, who's on TV shows, is the backhand is number 1, the serve is number 2, the forehand is number 3. But with so Mike McLaughlin said, should we pull this from the files? He says, no, leave it in there. I mean, because actually Danny Cooper, for example, understandably, he's gonna have a whistle and he's going to start, he's on court 1 and he's looking down at court 3 and somebody does it, they don't really know what they're doing. Now, if they knew what they're doing, Vic would be the last person. Let the person teach the class any way they want, have their own style, let their personality come out. But Vic understood that. I said, Vic, it's a two-sided problem, is that there's been people that have gone over to work in Europe that haven't even come to Vic Braden Tennis College in California. And I remember being offered an opportunity to go to Germany. And I said, no, I said, I'm here to learn Vic Braden. I'm not here to learn German. And so but at one point, they were asking me to go. I said, okay. I later did go, but I went from college to college and had a very firsthand experience. Helmut Meyer was the manager on what the competency level was within. So anyway, with Vic, I was doing a reel. It was reel to reel. It was talking about not VHS. Before VHS, it was reel to reel. And one of my coworkers, a staff member, because I was going with book 2, and this was even before book 2 was written, but Vic had made the change that I was teaching. Then the book came out, and actually, I'm sorry, it was not the update. It was Vic Braden teaching children. Mm-hmm. It wasn't Tennis 2000. So that was the assignment that you had. But the tennis teaching children, there was, like, say, Robert Nerschel, the elbow, have the racket face closed. And so then, I didn't say anything. Or the fellow coach said it in front of the group I was teaching. And then I went back to the book and went to Mary Lay, the head coach. And it created a little bit of a stink because it came out that only Mary and I were the only people on the staff at that time that had read the book cover to cover. People are busy but no, I tell people that it was great to send you out there in that opportunity, that those set of circumstances. But I worked for Braden. Second time I went through the program, that 5-day program for coaches. I beat the rent. I did it as a tennis bum playing tournaments. So I continued to be a tennis bum instead of playing tournaments. And I had gone to all these places to study tennis, but I'm at Vic's place. And I didn't want to work. I was just being Vic's gopher. Go for this, go for that. Bartending nights, just at not like a hardcore bar, but a place where you 1 o'clock in the morning, you're closing it. Had hair back then. So not only your clothes, but your hair stinks. You jump in a swimming pool with a bar of soap illegally. And Vic would show up at 6. I'd be there at 5:45 with bells on. And, like then when he would travel, I would travel. He'd be going somewhere to do some project. And so I'm going to go in and watch Lansdorp teach tennis. I'm going to go here, going to go there throughout Southern Cal.
What I believe that the listeners need to know is you really sacrificed a lot of your time to learn the game around Vic, and like you said, with others around there. But you really invested a lot of time to really learn the game. Really learn how to teach and be around that. A lot of teachers don't do that.
Well, thanks. I think I tell people that should go at least 3 years before you accept money. People are accepting money and it's like they have no idea. It's thievery. It's like, come on, you got to pay your dues. You can't just say, yeah, I'll charge you for a tennis lesson. I just think, you mentioned your older brother, you learn from older brothers. Older brothers or people that grew up in hockey, the chirping. What do you do when you're teaching tennis? You just started to learn how to play tennis. What do you mean you're taking money, showing people how to play? The whole thing, you don't know your ass from your elbow. But from that, got to work with a master. There's so many things we're talking about, David Wheaton being there. Mm-hmm. Actually in those files, a lot of times players are going to give credit to the person they're with. And, I think Jimmy Connors is great. You go back to Mom 1, Mom 2, but Jimmy, Vic got in a little trouble with Jimmy because he said, yeah, his His serve goes 74 miles an hour, but his grunt goes 102. And he actually had a good looking serve until he finally tossed that ball so far over his head. And when he hit it, just to let you know how good he was, he looked like a diver on a board where he was in a jackknife position, just collapsed at the waist. I think out of 10, 5 US Open, 5 Wimbledon finals, I mean, I would just make this as a bet that he was an 8 out of 10. I mean, he was just, maybe not as good as Monica Seles was for a few years, just dominating, but way up there. People forgot about Seles. But anyway, there's a letter, a thank you letter from Gloria Connors thanking Jimmy, and David Wheaton getting that toss out in front, getting the toss to the right. The Germans wanted to have a Grand Slam Cup. They wanted to have a major. And in a lot of ways, it's not really fair. I was like, well, Australia has one and France has one. And I mean, the 4 countries that have majors is not rotate around. Let's share the wealth. So the Germans at one time, I remember Peter Korda won it. And he hired a kid we trained, Orlean Stanoychev, as a hitting partner. And then Orlean, through that, got the confidence to, it's on our course tennis intelligence, apply the late bloomer. He went 5 sets with a Kafelnikov, 19 years old. A kid who's here now, who's the same age. He needs to look at that tape. But go ahead.
The viewers also need to know that, I mean, Vic was an exceptionally personable, wonderful gentleman. I mean, he's a 100% gentleman. But it was the Kodo Research Center. I mean, it wasn't just a tennis facility. It wasn't just a tennis resort. People even understand that it was the Kodo Research Center. He basically researched the game. And when I was there, and I'm sure you did it as well, but I was Vic's cameraman. It's a $100,000 camera that you're shooting slow motion film with. It wasn't, you're not using your smartphone and you're not using a small little digital camera. You're using a expensive movie camera, and he's shooting very expensive slow speed film. And then you go into his studio and he's doing a lot of research. And the big thing when I was there is and obviously Dr. Gideon Ariel, who I believe you had on the podcast. So Dr. Gideon Ariel, I recall actually being digitized, and I analyzed myself on that. I have to try to be diplomatically correct, but I do recall Vic mentioning to me that because Dr. Gideon Ariel did not see a figure. All he seen is stick figures on the computer. And Dr. Gideon Ariel mentioned to Vic, he goes, well, is this guy Richard, is he black? Because I was really good, but I hesitated right to the last segment, right over my shoulder, because I tossed the ball back a little bit far. So I muscled it from there. But my mechanics were really good. And I hope I don't get in trouble with that one. But
No.
But I remember him doing that. But when I was there, other than learning so much around, listening to Vic and lectures and just being around the man, different people coming in to get help with Vic. David Wheaton, I don't know how, but I know I met Huna when I was there. I don't know if she taught a little bit. Well, I'm just trying to remember, but I remember.
No, she did teach some there.
Yeah, Huna may have come in and taught a little bit while I was there.
And that was world news because she had defected from China.
Yeah. So, but really the huge, and Vic has always been on the leading edge of research. Starting with Dr. Gideon Ariel with the Kodo Research Center and starting up all that digitation work. But the big thing was he did a digital analysis of Andre Agassi, and Vic would always say anybody can come to him and give him information, and if they can prove something to him, he's wide open, to hear the information, and he'd be willing to learn and stuff like that. But he realized that Agassi added an extra segment into his forehand. And that was the pre-stretch where Agassi, kind of went back with a loose wrist, and then he grabbed it and he pre-stretched his forearm and got an extra power segment because Agassi was very locked in on his forehand. But he added that extra power segment off of his forehand. So Vic was very big on that, on kind of adding that in, because the way we're teaching and the way I teach, and especially with the GreatBase and getting folks to really, hit the ball efficiently and injury preventive wise. It's not one of your early stages to get somebody to start using a pre-stretch on their forehand to hit a forehand. That's a later stage development thing. But I know he worked a lot with that. He was working with some juniors, had kids coming in, and he was working a lot with that power segment with the pre-stretch. So I know that was something that he found on his work.
Yeah, let's come back to that. That's a key point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Vic was a myth buster. He was a breakthrough guy. And academia, Vic was ABD, all but dissertation. He wanted to prove that you could help a child more through sport than on a psychiatrist's couch, being in an office. And at UCLA turned him down, and he basically turned his back on academia and said, okay. And at one point, he had a TV show called Vic's Vacant Lot, that you can learn more. And unfortunately, that's gone away through the ups and downs of sandlot sports, pickup sports, backyard sports. But a true researcher, Vic was a breakthrough guy. A researcher, they research the research. But Vic would get the research and share it and say, hey, we were doing this wrong. We got to do this right. Vic was, and people would misinterpret his presentation was so strong. He was so funny.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was like a scientist and a comedian all wrapped up into one. The one thing about Gideon, and he was on our, I brought it up, and he said, but just like you said, well, that might be a little controversial, is, body composition and, fast twitch, slow twitch, a muscle fiber, and, a black athlete hits a force plate, white athlete hits a force plate. There's definitely some differences. And, the funny movie, White Man Can't Jump. And then you get into the history and with what's transpired in life, it's like, whoa, how does some of this genetic makeup, how did that happen? But with a Gideon aerial line is, you can see movement, but you can't see forces. And actually, Vic, I've always said that I don't know anyone who had as much information as Vic, but so misinterpreted because people wouldn't really think deeply about his presentation. I tell people all the time, I think I would have been just like every other Tom, Dick, and Harry and said, Vic's a funny guy. But I volunteered for the Boca Raton Tennis Association to show Go for a Winner, mixed doubles, fantastic adventure. And that should be on the tennis channel like every Sunday morning. And it's for doubles. And everything that's on that tape stands the test of time. So over Saturday and Sunday, I conquered working the rewind and reload the film, and just sat there and watched it. And then I realized, like, whoa, very quickly, I mean, from that tape, the deuce court player always plays more returns than the ad court player. And but the macho male ego, the man, he tells the woman, I'm going to play the big point. I'm going to play the ad court. Well, if you and I are playing doubles and you're in the deuce court, I'm in the ad court, you play 3 returns, I play 2. So next time we return as a team, you're playing return 4, I'm playing 2. And Vic would go, yeah, just like in baseball, the kid, they put him out right field because he's picking his nose or picking dandelions. I mean, Braden was a funny guy. And yeah, if you can't catch in baseball, they put you on right field, Little League Baseball. So 85% of players or more are right-handed. They run around their backhand. They don't get the racket below the ball. They pull horizontally. Where's the ball go? It goes to the deuce court. 85% of players are right-handed. They've been misinformed on the continental grip. They have a true continental grip. Where's the racket face? It faces the deuce court. So, and all the way to Wimbledon, there's so many myths. So, when Vic passed away, I mean, it was very nice that people were saying so many nice things. And people say, yeah, I really, I knew Vic and his work backwards and forwards. And it's like, well, it required a lot of thought. And actually people who, like yourself, who had a really good introduction to Vic Braden, you could take Vandermeer progressions and use it with science, or, understand the Van Horn balance and apply it with science. And that way it's an art. I mean, really, I would say I'm not an artist, I'm not a scientist, but there's a craft. It's called tennis teaching. Some people, they learn to, as a startup carpenter, they learn to take the old wood and make the pile of junk outside, and they learn to sweep sawdust, and it takes them a long time before they can build the cabinets. And I don't think too many people, you think about tennis teaching, they learn to build cabinets. Andy Fitzell says it all the time. You just have to watch your students hit one ball. Just have them watch them hit one ball. And, it's like with college tennis. A coach will take a team here. They take them up to here, but they're playing against a team who's recruited to here. And it's the judgment of how people teach tennis. But when Vic was younger, I would do these traveling clinics with Vic, and I would do the video, and he'd be outside. But he got older. I'd be in charge of the outside courts, and he'd be inside. He'd be right in a nice room like this, and not out in the hot sun. And that's one thing that you said it quite well. Is I wish that Vic had never said, well, Agassi on the pre-stretch, because he does add a segment. And even Sampras, you raise that elbow, you see Alcaraz do it. It just helps them keep the forehand on the same side of their body. Does add a segment. Matt Canole said it a couple of weeks back, a very successful coach. It's just not right for young people going, well, this is what Federer does. This is what Nadal does. Yeah, but you're in the 5th grade, but Peter Burwash said for years, the best place to teach tennis is where people have never seen tennis played by pros because they misinterpret it.
You yourself had mentioned this, that you believe more research, because the Tennis for the Future, all the books and everything that Vic has put together. You yourself, I recall mentioning that there's so much information, research information, that never made it in the book. There's so much that couldn't make the cut. There's so much research that Vic.
Well, people should know, like Tennis Magazine, there used to be Gladys Heldman's World Tennis. There used to be 2 magazines every month. Now there's 1. Tennis Magazine, people don't even know what a phone book is now, but it was like a small phone book. There'd be 2 articles on the forehand in one magazine. And now tennis has really become a much smaller sport. And, it's never going to go away. Tennis is so strong internationally, but here in the States, we need to say, hey, you want to learn to play pickleball, learn to play tennis. I heard someone say, well, I teach tennis by science and pickleball by art. And, one is by fact and one is by feel. And Rachel Rohrbacher, who we taught for years and years on this podcast, she's one of the best players in the world in pickleball right now. She thanked us for, having an Eastern grip on the forehand side. Tennis magazines are written at a 6th grade reading level. It's like people that are selling rackets. Gideon and Errol, they both were so good for each other. It's not the engineers and the physicists that are selling rackets. What they write, and I remember Vic used to say, like, titanium is so expensive, and this is the titanium in your racket. They just squirt it with a little titanium. It's like, I've been told by a couple people that are in the business that bottled water has to be, in this country, 8% of it has to be from spring water. So I think people are just kind of loading up tap water and putting it in a bottle. Raven Clausen, who's been a guest of the podcast, he said, my father, he's not going to buy bottled water. He goes, people are spending they're spending more money on water than they are on gasoline. And unfortunately, there's places in the world where people don't even have water. Let me ask you this. So McLaughlin brings some things to me that I certainly have copies of, but there's old brochures. And he actually brought a sweatshirt from Vic's. They finally have emptied out a storage unit for the Tennis Channel. They digitized all the film, which is added up about the size of a 4-car garage. They haven't digitized the audio. Vic used to have breakfast. I remember just being fortunate enough to be the hitting partner. I was just going to hit balls and be Gideon, Vic, and the player. And Vic, they're having at breakfast, and I didn't have a speaking part, but he's filming it. He's recording it. He recorded everything. But Mike brought this to me as a gift. It's good because my first copy is all beat up, but it's John Niednagel's book. And I know let's talk about that. You were brain typed by John Niednagel. Vic had many partners.
A lot of people doing research for him.
Yeah, and
or came to him with
we're
research or ideas,
collaborating. But this is and on the inside cover, John wrote, "Vic, brain typing would not be brain typing without you. Thank you for all your loyal support over all these years. Gratefully, John." But tell us about being brain typed.
Yeah, they that was the other part of being there with Vic is obviously the pre-stretch that he started teaching and started looking into, and then all of a sudden with the brain typing with John Neednagel, I had the opportunity to be there when they were putting a CD-ROM together, and Vic literally said it because a lot of research was a lot of testing was being done or research to see how valid John's information was. But John had found, and I believe the story goes is John Neednagel was watching his son play baseball, and it just clicked to him. He watched his son hit the ball a certain way, and then he started watching other kids. No, obviously he would have a more of a detailed version of that, but John found the link. He figured he pretty much realized that in the brain, if you process information in a certain area of the brain, and a certain area of the brain controls certain motor movements. And with that, he found the link between Myers-Briggs or personality traits and where the motor programs were based. And he could literally walk around or walk into a room and just watch to see how people were moving, to see how they move their bodies, to pick up what character trait that's, or Myers-Briggs, whatever traits they were. So I was with he was putting together a CD-ROM, and I was there with John. He was a pretty quiet gentleman, but I was there, and we had a tennis college. We had a group in at the resort hitting tennis balls and doing lessons, and I basically walked around with John because John was looking for a particular brain type to interview for the CD-ROM. And I just asked John, I just said, "John, you basically know everybody's brain type here, correct?" He says, "Yes." And there may be one question between two types that you may have to go up and ask one question to see the difference of one type versus the other. And then I just said, "Well, obviously, what is my type?" And he says, "Well, you're an INTJ." And he didn't even blink. He already knew it.
INTP?
I'm an INTJ.
INTJ.
So,
of course,
yeah, so I went right to the book that you have right over here, and I started reading the information. And basically what people need to know is genetically, you walk, talk, and think the way you do just because of how you're genetically wired. Now, you go through different stages in life, and you start strengthening areas that you're not as strong in. That's just the nature of life. But your genetic core is there. And then, and by that, you have your certain strengths and weaknesses, character traits. I mean, being an NT, the initial the two middle letters are really where your true core strength is. Like as an NT, it's more really from neck up. It's the brain. So NFs are more linguistics and verbals as an NF. And then STs are fine motor skilled. SFs are gross motor skilled. But he just, Vic literally said, if all this research that's being done comes up correct, that John should win what is it called? A Nobel Peace Prize for this, because be able to find the link between, Jungian psychology or character traits and motor skills. It was huge. Just knowing why you walk, talk, and think the way you do. And I know Vic put out a video and put out CD-ROMs in this, and Vic was 100% behind it. And I know he had mentioned that to you as well. But I was there during that time. And, and John goes in, he can go all the way back in time, and he can brain type certain people. I mean, I know like Einstein was an INTJ, Jimmy Carter was an INTJ. I know Tim Mayotte in tennis was an INTJ. There's just certain people, and I can kind of, what's the name? coach that used to coach the Lakers. The last coach, the Bulls and the Lakers. Coach who failed as the next GM. I forgot.
Yeah, from North Dakota.
Yeah,
big tall guy.
Yeah,
it's not
I'll
Phil. It's not Phil. Phil Knight's a Nike guy. Yeah. Do you have it?
Phil Jackson. Yeah, Phil Jackson was an INTJ.
Round of applause. Let's take a little break there. Nice and loud. We'll have to have Yvonne edit this. We have a coach here, originally from Greece. He's been a guest on our podcast. Say it nice and loud. You repeat it. First name.
Konstantinos.
Did I get it right?
You're so polite. You didn't correct me when I said Konstantinos. Say it one more time.
Konstantinos.
I'll go with the last name.
Ninos?
No.
Alevizopoulos.
Oh, nice try. Azavil. You have to be an NF to get that.
I'm an NF.
There you go.
I have it. Say it a little more time.
Alevizopoulos.
Azavillopoulos. How not even close.
But go and backpedal with our podcast. Talking about Vic, his Kostas. He grew up with Stefanos Tsitsipas, and we just connected on the phone. He found us via the internet, and his coach was fortunate to look at these old. They weren't old at the time. Tapes of Vic Braden. And he listened, and he said, "Well, about to, shut it off. I'd listen a little more." But he became a student, and that's how they were taught. That's a story in itself. But on the brain typing, John Neednagel, like Vic, he doesn't have the credentials. Vic wasn't a PhD, or say John wasn't an MD, and so kind of looked at as a pseudoscientist. But Vic, he wasn't. He went too fast for that malarkey. A piece of paper and whatever. But with, people have companies and, okay, how can I do a better job with my employees? So the whole staff of, the Franklin day planners, like the CEO and the COO and the GM and whatever, a group all show up and they're at Kodo and they're having a meeting. Vic used to tell a story. And, said, well, could we, after lunch, could we meet, maybe break it into smaller groups and talk to us one-on-one, and talking to Neednagel and saying, could you brain type all of us? And he goes, I already have. And he just went, he goes, well, you're this. And he said, this is why, and you're this, and this is why, and you're this. It's not scientifically validated. It doesn't put someone in a box, but man, what a great tool it is. Joel Trucker, who talked to him on the phone, great writer, who recently led the Paul McDonald, put together a reunion of Vic Braden tennis coaches, and they had a panel discussion. And Joel Trucker, great fan of Vic, great fan of tennis, great tennis mind. He led the panel, and he said that Mary Carrillo, an ENTJ, said to him, an ENTP, hey, you should check out this guy Braden's talking about, John Neednagel. So he just calls him up, and Neednagel brain typed him over the phone, just through his voice, and started telling him about his tennis game. On our website, there's the article that Vic and Joel Trucker put together. Again, it's just a great training tool. Mm-hmm.
As a side note, that Shaq, Wayne Gretzky, Ivan Lendl, John McEnroe are all ISTPs. They're all the same brain type. Different, because some can have different body types.
I think Laver and Navratilova, there's more. Amazing. Edberg and McEnroe. They're both
games.
They're both ISTPs, and one growing up in Sweden and one growing up in New York City. A little bit different how they went about things, but I think one thing. This goes back to older people would have to think, well, what was Jimmy Connors like? What was Pete Sampras like? The E and the I, where you get your energy from. And Jimmy was an I. John McEnroe was an I. Mm-hmm. Vic Braden asked John McEnroe's mother, is he an introvert or extrovert? And she said he's a flaming introvert. But his job forces him to be an extrovert.
Well, and Sampras and Federer are both ENTPs, from my understanding. So
Yeah. An ENTP is a planner. Vic used to say that Federer, when he was a kid, he made a list of all the shots he had to hit. I was flattered when Vic said, Steve, we should have been running a camp together and just coaching ISTPs and ESTPs. Almost every NFL quarterback is an ESTP.
yeah, except Braden was an ENFP. Braden. I'm sorry, Brady, Tom Brady, and Vic are the same brain type. They're ENFPs.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I knew Vic was a great quarterback, but at the high school level, I didn't know that Brady was an ENFP,
Yeah.
Pied Piper. Actually,
loves the spotlight.
ENFPs, again, Neil Nagel's book, it's interesting, so many things. I really use it more from the behavioral side than the motor movement side, but ENFPs, my mother, ENFP, they can endure a lot of pain. My mother went and had a hip operation, and she thought she was just going to drive home by herself. And Vic, he certainly could endure a lot of pain.
I highly suggest people go to the website, read up on it, go to the GreatBase site, and it's a very, very extremely helpful tool, especially for parents, for their kids, and always, because sometimes the interaction between parents and kids isn't always, it doesn't always so seamless, and it's very important to know.
Did you meet his son, Jeremy?
I may have met him once. When I was there, Jeremy was just kind of under his tutelage and learning under him. But John was very protective of who knew this information, for sure. And I believe Jeremy was, he was trained or whatever from Jonathan. I have not been in contact really since I was at Vic's on any of this. I sent a variety of people over to John to get brain typed while I was in California at the time, because I felt it was really helpful for certain people to know.
Well, I think, to understand how you're wired. Yeah. I think also, too, is that you're actually both an introvert and extrovert, but one's your primary, one's your secondary. Mm-hmm. You can be an introverted extrovert. We have a podcast that's on it with Andy Fitzell, who I would say that Andy uses it more, the opposite of myself, uses it more from a motor programming. For me, well, if someone's gross motor skill or fine motor skill, it's like, hey, you got to get them to do the whole package. They've got to be able to have finesse, but also be able to be explosive. Mm-hmm. Be the complete package.
Yeah. John will tell us. John has information. I don't know how much he's shared on his website, but I know that he worked with Shaq on his free throw. I know that he worked with Sammy Sosa on his batting. He called certain bust, so to speak, with quarterbacks coming out of college. He worked with a lot of. He was at the Pro Bowl a lot. He worked with a lot of the I don't know which particular ones, but he worked with NFL football.
Danny
Ainge
with when he was with the Boston Celtics. I am not current either, but my oldest brother was the GM, really of two teams, the associate GM of a third, and I remember telling him because Major League Baseball. It was a big deal with Ryan Leaf and Peyton Manning. And you don't want a quarterback who's a J. You want a quarterback who's a P. Mm-hmm. And, the San Diego, he recommended them not to draft Ryan Leaf. Mm-hmm. Then like who plays doubles with one another? It's like John Newcomb, who was an ENTJ. Hopman told him, or he told Tony Roach, just let Newcomb think he's boss. He's an ENTJ, and just let him think he's calling the shots. And
that's where it can be very valuable. That's where it can be very valuable. It's a partner for doubles or whatever.
Yeah, and
there's different applications.
I mean, you can't treat everyone the same. I mean, mm-hmm. To say you have to be schizophrenic, it's not to be unfair, but you can't have everybody do the same. Treat everyone. This one shoe fits all.
Right.
I mean, the physics of tennis. Okay, you got to square the racket face out at the hit, but how do you approach someone with? I would think your background, or I should say, I know your background. Too many times, I refer to it as being an island. You had the training that you did the hard yards. go through the books and tape and rewrite notes. And, it's very difficult to fit in the tennis industry where technique is like avoided. It's absent.
Well, being a student of the game, I mean, how many true students of the game are there out there? And even you said it, you really expect people to learn this game before they go and step on the court to teach it, and make any money off of it. But it's still not that way. I mean, even this past summer, I had a couple college kids that came in where I teach, and were literally put on the court to teach, and one of them never taught in his life, but just because they can play better than anybody else that's around there, they get a job, and because of the they don't have to pay them as much or whatever it is. It's I'm not here to make it challenging on that end, but I have a high respect for for the profession like you do, and people should have a very good knowledge of the game.
Unfortunately, in junior tennis, most parents, they don't have product knowledge. Excuse me, I've said it wrong. They don't have consumer knowledge. Vic would say, socioeconomic functioning levels, if, most pros can't afford their own lessons. If someone can afford a lesson, unless they inherit it, there's a money tree in the backyard, they're pretty sharp if they can, especially today. I mean, how much is that lesson? It was $100. Tennis parents have $100 bills falling out of their pocket. But then on the flip side, the pro is the one who doesn't have product knowledge. And it's just like, whoa, cluster muck up. Granted, there's so many different hats to wear, but when it just comes down to ball striking, I mean, are you going to teach what's happened or what's happening? Today arguments, they don't go past the forehand. They just don't go past the forehand, the modern game. And, by the time you feel the hit, the ball's 7 to 11 feet away from you. Vic used to do this thing. It was, well, let me show you how important the follow through is. He would say, it's just basically an insurance plan where you can play it here. He would hit a ball. I was doing this the other day for some kids. You drop a ball, you hit it, then you just quickly take the racket backwards. You can hit the ball fine with no follow through. Just what happens at that moment of impact. Are you stabilized with the court? Do you have a kinetic chain and how the body segments interact? Do you have a long lever? Is the head still? Is that breath out at the ball? Are you like a Raggedy Ann doll and the body's going everywhere? The body's a leader.
That's where Vic's teaching. Obviously, there's the art of it. Is Vic was very big into segments and watching the segments and seeing that's kind of his approach. And he'd watch a player. I mean, obviously knew all the research and all that, but he'd see the segments. So if he knew on the serve that the last links aren't going, he'd get the ball out in front to the right, and he'd work on a technique to make sure they get the last segments to snap. Or if it's a different stroke, they want to make sure that the kinetic chain is working. But he was very big on spotting the links that you needed to work on to get it efficient. And that was kind of
when you were there, the studio is certainly much more elaborate. I remember being in that studio where he could, you see people, for example, they don't have a backhand grip, one hand or two handed, but say a two handed backhand. They don't have a backhand grip. If you don't change the grip, you have to change the wrist. They collapse the wrist. Then what happens is they collapse the arm. Now the contact point is very close to them. And Vic would just be able to erase everything, but just like show them what position their wrist is at the hit, or just where their lower arm is at the impact point. And, but with variables, there's just so many variables. We're winding down here, summer 2024. This is our last week, and schools have already started, and we have 3 newbies here. We have some people that have been here before. We have some people that this is their first time, but they've worked with one of our coaches for, say, 3 or more years. And it is unfortunate. You can say, well, you can go with what you got. But will the airplane get off the ground? And to change, I think many young people, changing strokes, is the most difficult thing. Fortunately, it's the most difficult thing they've encountered in their young lives. And it's basically, Vic, brain memory. deprogram, reprogram, myelin. The brain produces myelin through repetition. I think parents need to get a copy of Daniel Coyle's book, The Talent Code. Play it in the car. Rob Krychek years ago. He's a guy who he made the car a classroom, and just repetition. Kobe Bryant. Basics turn into instincts just over and over and over again. And then the human spirit. The pain and change. The old is better than the new. But coming back to you being an island, I've been in some situations in tennis where just so many where you don't own the place and there's the bottom line and they're just worried about you don't want to lose business and is everybody going to be happy and but what helps me is having trained tennis teachers starting at the age of 26. My former students send me students. So to have someone come in and say, well, they're a national champion, they're this is their level. And then to see that we work with someone who's, been number one in their age group, the same way we work with someone who's in the early childhood development class. Granted that, okay, the speed of the lesson has to change. The compatibility factors, you have to eventually say, okay, ready, play. But, the ball doesn't know how old you are. The ball doesn't know, okay, you're number one, so you can hold the racket any way you want. You're number one, so the strings can face down and the ball can still go where you want it to go. I mean, Richard Hernandez, a guy who you probably know well, right? So you do know him well. You mentioned him. Is Steve. Remember, people aren't stupid. They're completely effing stupid. And that's not very nice, but with, what people are buying into, what people accept is that, again, they don't have a filtering system. If someone is a good player, society is, that means they can teach. As Welby Van Horn would say, who might be the best combination of teacher, I say teacher, not coach, teacher of tennis. Certainly he could coach, but a teacher, not a recruiter, someone who's teaching, taking a beginner, and next thing you know, they're playing national level tennis and being a world-class player. He would say it's a bonus, but but you've been in situations where you haven't had that luxury where you're teaching and then someone shows up and then it's a credibility factor, like instant credibility. Oh, they're not going with the parents, perhaps, whoever writes the checks. They're not going with science, logic, or imagery. They just want to know who wins. And that's like the oldest trick in the book is with academies is you recruit people who can already play. Hey, the elevator ride. Yeah, I know we've only known each other for a few minutes, but just like a college recruit, they step on campus and, okay, I'm your coach. We got a match on Tuesday. Yeah. Like currently the club you're at or the club or where you've worked in the past. What comes to your mind when I say, well, you've been an island? In other words, not like say where you are right now is that we've got everybody that expression, they're all on the same page.
They're not on the same page. You just have to, being here and, I'm here with you. I haven't, so the viewers know, we haven't seen each other for about 30 years.
No,
Since the mid 90s, since I was at Rochester, New York. That's the last, Rochester and then up to Toronto. And then from there I went to Vic's and we've been in contact.
Yeah.
But we haven't formally seen each other for that many years. It's been a long time.
With, I think of Panam Paul, she came to a workshop we were running. She said, Steve, I haven't seen you in 14 years. It seemed more like 14 minutes. You can catch up very quickly, but we have stayed in touch for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even
but the teaching. I mean, being here and being at the facility and everybody. You're training people at the same time as not only kids, but you have interns in here. You have people that are learning how to play and learning how to teach at the same time. It just needs to be more universal. It just needs to be more structured where more people really are educated. That's where when you had tennis tech, you were out there, you were getting the word out, and coaches were getting knowledge, they were being trained. But there's still information. I mean, Vic did so much work, and in the 70s and the 80s, all the way through his life to get effective fact-based information out there, and had people do research. That it's still not set as the main structure. There's just too much information out there that people will look at and don't see what really happens, and don't see the research that's been done, and don't validate it. And it's the ego in the game, and I'm playing at this particular level, or they're just not sold on. It's tough to be. I guess it's tough to be a hardcore Braden coach, and really understand the understand that physical law and the dimensions of the court dictate stroke production, and just understand that, and be trained in a way that you can really help people out. And it's just not. I mean, you're doing your best to get the information out there so people can get trained and get knowledge. But if this information became more universal and more accepted around the world, and more people were doing it, then just like with golf. I mean, when golf, with the digitation and the videotaping with golf, I mean, there a lot of more people are on board in golf with technique and stuff and biomechanics than in tennis. But when all the video stuff and all the programs come out with technical information, I mean, golf came on board, and there's a lot more qualified golf coaches than there are tennis coaches, in other sports. It's too bad that there's too much misinformation, just hurtful. There's no right and wrong, but just effective, efficient information and fact-based information, globalized, and people more accepting to it, to the science end of it. The artistic side, you can learn from everybody and all that, and that's what I find. And whether it's at my club, whether it's another club down the road, it's just still very prevalent. And there's some obviously very good coaches out there that I don't know about, and there's a lot of coaches that you've trained and all that, and there's some that maybe even have educated themselves on their own and are very good coaching in certain ways. But it's just a way of getting through the ego of it, and just getting it where it's more universally accepted that the science end of it was done many, many years ago. That's why it's Tennis for the Future, and Vic's done a lot of research, and just getting everybody on board with it. In my opinion, is getting the word out, and just getting people trained in a way that it's accepted.
It's like we always say, can we accept that the tennis court's a rectangle?
Mm-hmm.
Can we accept that water runs downhill, not uphill?
Mm-hmm.
I'm always telling people, I grew up, I would say in a hockey family, but all the hockey players played golf in the summer. So always around golf, have a golfer's mentality. Young Yvonne, who helps us so much. I had him watch the Golf Channel. Here's a woman who's the top 10 in the world. Of course, golf is like the basketball player at the foul line, just standstill shot. And, static balance is something that's become obsolete with, the one thing with 30 years though is I've had people who've left the profession and come back, and that training that you got for 2 years, I mean, it's like a fundamental. It stands the test of time.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just say this. Carl Hale, at one time he had a second home in Tampa, so I spent quite a bit of time around Carl and his family, young girls. And I remember him saying, you got to have marquee success. The people who really make an impact are the ones that are, on TV. It's like Mike Costa, the comedian. He told me one time, he goes, you have to really be successful. You have to be, it's just like tennis. You have to be on TV. But Carl Hale, he works with Richard Hernandez. They have a resurfacing company or a tennis. I guess they even build courts. Carl's somebody who really knows tennis. He's been in his whole life. And those guys are like brothers. They argue back and forth. And certainly I hear Richard's side of it, 95% more than I would hear Carl's. Just like you, I mean, I haven't seen Richard Hernandez in a long time either. But, just you don't lose touch with people because when you send someone students, you're in that Northeast and New England area, and sent a lot of students here over the years but it takes a matter of time. You can't go to a weekend seminar. You can't go to a conference. You can't do YouTube research. I mean, you have to sit down, listen, take notes. Like the commentators, I love to listen to them, but you just don't hear tennis math. Well, because of the angle of the racket face, the angle of the racket path, or even why people have improved. Vic, when he was on TV, he was even told they wanted him to make it light and lively. They wanted to say, let's get people to laugh instead of educating Joe Public. And what we're trying to do is tennis just needs to become more affordable and more accessible. Two guys in your area that are tennis junkies, Ed Weiss, who wrote the book, Welby Van Horn, master tennis teacher. I should just rattle off the title. I heard from Ed this week. We still haven't got, and we will. I mean, he's well aware that we want to put it up. He's worked with Welby's boys and the publisher and get his book up online for free. People should know the Welby Van Horn balance. I know at the end of the week, I'm getting on an airplane with a group of people. We're going to go to Baylor University, and that's one thing that we can just knock out in 30 minutes, teaching people here is how you teach balance. Boom, quickly. Then once you have people that know how to balance their body, then it's okay, now this is how you maneuver the racket. But also Greg Moran, who, great fans of tennis, and I know I've met them a little bit. I've told both of them that, and I did go do a project for Ed. Everybody's really busy. I mean, Ed's a lawyer who has given so much to underprivileged children through tennis. Greg has owned a large tennis club, just sold it, but still running it for the people who purchased it. But if they could see you, if they just came to this setting, I've told them, you see this setting. I know you spent so much time with Dave Anderson. You were in Dallas like a year ago, right? Mm-hmm. And there's some people that I sent to you that now are in Dallas. And I remember when Billy Freer was alive, Dave Anderson told Billy, if I was to show up and we both had our whistles and we were walking around, we would be easily as productive as the 25 pros. So someone like Anderson, just like when I was with you in Rochester, we got to make this work for 25 pros. It's just not simple. But the compensation packages, entry level, you could just make such a long list where, okay, this player is 8 years old and they basically have 3 years of bad tennis. Oh, they have experience. They can time a ball. They can move to a ball, but they're completely a redo. Their game is a train wreck. And then you have another 8-year-old, they're a complete beginner. And then, then you have, talk about brain types, and you have the brain types of the parents and the siblings and but to take it's better on an indoor court, but take 7,200 square feet. Richard Hernandez, he asked, and we did it. He said, and this was a byproduct of COVID, you want to talk about group dynamics. Like where you are in Connecticut, you could take one court, take 10, we talked about the tennis mate, take 10 portable backboards. And we recommended this recently for a large club. A group of us went and we filmed for 3 days. And you're filming how kids are hitting the ball. And so, you know, you get a conference table out, you're filming kids, just Johnny on the spot, and you're teaching kids to teach kids. And you can put easily, you know, Dennis Vandermeer, 24 people on one court, and then they rotate that. Then you get people convinced that, okay, initially we have to learn the game. There's your game, and there's can be some adaptations. You know, maybe not everyone's using an Eastern forehand grip. But they much better to turn on three, much better to have a centered ready position. If they have the grip on four in the ready position, they have no options. And then you start going so fast like that, they go, what do you mean? And you go, well, let's go in the room and we'll show you Djokovic's ready position. And, you know, we'll show you what happens at the impact point. And then there's the money. Besides the compensation of the coaches, you know, the club owners, they don't want the revenue to go down. And it's like, well, let's make it fun. Costas over here helping us out. You're getting the job done over there? All right. Costas helping us out, and it's a 3-man operation tonight, and he's working the camera. And with, I told him we were watching some of the kids do the exercises we have. You know, they could have been drop hitting balls, tossing balls slowly to one another. And coming back to the point I made with you is that, well, this kid's an 11.5, he's a giant, he's an athlete, and he's doing it. You know, this girl just got back from World Cup. You know, she played the junior Wimbledon 14s and she's doing it. And it's like, okay. And then everybody's in. They're not in because of the science. They're not in because of the logic. But what I told Costas is that you teach tennis this way, in America, you're going to lose your job. People are going to run away. And
it takes time. It takes time to learn this way. It takes time to learn. It's not an easy sport to grasp. You try to simplify it.
But not only to learn, but you have to learn to teach too.
Right.
And you know, that's one of the beauties of peer teaching. Let's just do this for a minute. I mean, you took a hiatus, so 2 different times you were working outside tennis. Tell us about being in sales.
Yeah, 2 hiatuses. Well, yeah, 2 major hiatuses I took was premium car sales. I was in Southern California. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I had 2 young kids, and I wasn't quite making it in tennis. I had my own company, trying to teach on my own, and I just wasn't making enough money. And my wife at the time was also working a little bit part-time, but it just wasn't making enough money for the kids. So I decided to give premium car sales a shot. So I started to work for Calabasas Mercedes. So I just got into selling cars. I ended up doing that for about 5 years in Southern California. And it worked out well for me, and I was able to make sure that my wife at the time could stay home with the kids, be able to bring the kids up and not have to work. So we had one income to do, and it was during a good time. The car business was good. I was able to make that transition. But the customer service end of it, learning a new, hopping into a new profession or new business, it's not always easy. But I went cold turkey. One Sunday I was teaching tennis. The next Monday I went right into car sales. And if anybody knows about car sales, it's sink or swim, and they don't teach you anything. They just show you a computer and send you on your own. And any of the car sales people don't really want you to make it, because you're pulling away from their income. So I went through some growing pains to learn it, but I did pretty well early on. I know I told you that story. I don't want to bore people with some of my car sales stories. But
just to summarize, that one sale is a car that cost $500,000.
Yeah, I sold a Maybach basically a week after I started in car sales, and that's a very interesting story that I'm not going to share. But it did give me money for that month, so I can just basically hunker down and try to learn the business. And
get in position to survive.
Right, survive, to make it through and get money for the family, and then start to learn the business. But the profession, by being at Tennis Tech and and being a professional and greeting people and knowing that it's about customer service and product knowledge, that really obviously helped out. And I always remembered what I learned in tennis tech is if you go, you always want to be the first one at work and the last one to leave. If you want to take a little hiatus during the day, as long as the boss doesn't know, you show that you're putting all that time in. So I got there early, and I was always the first there and the last to leave. And I put my time in, and I learned how to do that business. And there were other sales that I did after that I basically did pretty well. And I learned a lot. You learn a lot about, meeting people and knowing product and just different aspects in a whole nother business.
I know a theme of tennis tech was people versus profit. People first, profit second. I've said this before, and car salesmen have a bad rep, correct? Where it's like, they're gonna burn you.
Yeah.
But I've told people that guy is such a great tennis teacher. If they were selling cars, they could convince you. They'd sell you the car without tires, and you'd save on air. That's a lot of tennis teachers. You have to do three things. I've always said this. You have to teach, you have to sell, and you have to organize. And you got to be able to do all three. You do have to be able, I think people get organized in the morning or the evening. If they're not doing one or the other, they're not going to be successful in the tennis teaching world. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is what I got to do tomorrow. You get up early. This is priority today. This is what has to get accomplished with and then your techie skills. You've always been a techie. So what else besides it being cars?
I went for Mercedes, and then I was easily recruited to go to Audi. I went from one dealership, and then really the top salesperson at that dealership moved and became a sales manager at an Audi dealership, and they heavily recruited me and wanted me to go work there. So I basically sold Mercedes and Audis.
And your customer service, you deliver a lot of cars as some celebs.
Yeah, just to some.
Yeah.
To some,
but then you were out of that and you actually were in another profession.
Yeah, then I got back into tennis. I moved back to Connecticut. That was in Los Angeles. And then I moved back to Connecticut, and I had a job at a car dealership. I lost that job on my way home, and then I got another car job. But then it didn't work out very well, and I said, well, let me just get back into tennis. And then I decided basically to hop on the cardio tennis bandwagon and start promoting cardio tennis. And I had a private school that I can run cardio tennis classes at, and I got basically just started my own DBA, my own company, and just started doing cardio tennis classes. And that first winter, I got hired at 2 different clubs to run their cardio program. So I just started to get back into tennis and did that for a while. And
I remember
at some point,
I remember when I first speaking to you about cardio, I'm thinking, here's this guy who knows so much about forehands and backhands. There's so few techies out there, and you really should be helping. There really isn't. We hear about player development, but you don't hear about teaching pro development. But I always say Richard Bodian is running cardio classes. Tell them about their cardio classes in Rochester, though.
Well, that's where I learned it. I mean, it wasn't the true cardio tennis classes that were run. When I was at Rochester under you, we actually did cardio tennis classes. What cardio tennis wasn't even the thing at that point. We ran them as what's known as a stress buster. So we didn't get a zillion people on the court and have them run around and jump over and go through ladders or go through agility things. We basically, put them through combination drills and had more tennis specific drilling. So I kind of took that model and just, the traditional cardio tennis classes weren't that model. So I just said, well, let me just hop on that and let me do them the way we did them in Rochester, and I believe they'll be pretty popular, and they were. And, so I did that for a while, but it was hard. It's hard in New England unless you're based in a club, because most of tennis is done indoors. Indoor clubs lock people in from September to May, and then in May they go outside outside for summer tennis to their clubs. But locking people in as early as September when you still have teaching time outside when it's nice, I felt it was just crazy, because you can be out there until November teaching tennis, but the indoor clubs lock you in. They lock people in, so it's tough to make it with something like that. But then the other business, I did that for a while and taught for myself. And the big reason why I did that is, as you mentioned earlier, it's hard with me, with all my information and all my knowledge that I have, to go work for somebody else where I'm around a facility that has a lot of incompetence, that doesn't have teachers, that it's not a structured program. It's not, the teachers really don't know what they're talking about. And I just wanted to do my own thing. Because I just wanted to be, not have that around me. So I kind of held off. I probably held progression on my development to get a position somewhere, just because I was stubborn and I wanted to, just.
You're honest. You're honest too. I mean,
yeah, I wanted
to be frank.
Yeah,
I mean,
I wanted to teach people correctly, and and for what I learned, and if I was going to service people with cardio tennis, they knew what they came out to get, and they came out for fitness aspect, and I felt as though I would start to get clientele to teach out of running those classes. But people enjoyed the cardio tennis so much more. Again, it's about the customer service, and there's players out there, and I got into adult teaching. I didn't want to do too much into junior teaching. But it's tough. If you're an adult, you really have to and really want to learn the game. Then I also found that those are choice few. There's not a lot that really do that, or they'll just believe anybody, and they'll take lessons from anybody to learn. So it was just a challenge. It was a challenge for me, and it didn't go over. I did that for some years, and then I got into premium audio video design.
Well, let me, before we go with that, because in tennis, in car sales, back in tennis. Then tell me auto.
I went into audio video sales and design. I worked for a division of Best Buy, which was known as Magnolia Design Centers. Magnolia Hi-Fi was a company that was based. It was a very well-known audio company in Seattle, and then they were very, very well known. And then Best Buy basically worked in conjunction with them to bring premium audio into Best Buy. So I was hired as what's called a system designer. So that's a whole nother. I mean, I always loved audio, and I always wanted to sell audio equipment. And I had an opportunity. A friend of mine told me about a job opening, and I always wanted to try it. So I gave it a shot, and it was selling very expensive audio equipment and going into homes or businesses and setting up audio video solutions, whether it's networking, whether it's distributed audio, whether it's a home theater, smart home features, just going into a home and saying, well, what would you like done in this home? And I became, and obviously it's a learning curve, because I have to learn product again. So you learn product, just like I had to learn product in selling cars. I had to learn that. And I did very well in car sales, and then I had to learn. The all the product with the audio video. But then also having the customer service part of it, where you're going into somebody's home, and the professionalism. I mean, I had to wear a suit and a tie, or at least a shirt and a tie. So it was going. And the same thing with the car business. You had to wear a tie, and you didn't have to wear a full suit, but you had to at least wear a shirt and tie, and you had to be presentable and professional.
And you reached what they call the $1 million round table, or
I was a $1 million salesperson, and that's selling $1 million worth of product in a year. And I did that 2 years running. I was in the business for 3 years, So probably my second and third year that I did that, I was $1 million salesperson. And the location that I did that at never had $1 million salesperson. And I was the only one to ever get that. But I worked very hard, and I worked like 60-hour work weeks, and I had no life, and I put on a lot of weight, and I just got to a point where it was just too much. It was too much. And
With,
then I went back into tennis again.
With convincing people to buy, convincing people to learn. That's certainly a challenge in tennis, is getting, think, well, they're buying a lesson, or I don't like the expression, are they going to buy in? The videotapes we make that are 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes just on stroke production, it's really a tool of persuasion. You're trying to convince them that the string should go towards the target. You're trying to convince them that they shouldn't, toss the ball so far over their head that they end up looking like a pretzel when they are at the impact point. With coming back to being Frank Giampaolo, I know he worked at a place, Lake Forest, right down the street from Coto de Casa. And I remember meeting Frank, and their parents should seek out his book, The Tennis Parents Bible. We were asking him, I said, Frank, there's nothing in the book about stroke production. And he said, yeah, then they wouldn't buy the book. So a smart guy, he wants to sell the book. But, and obviously, so he was in that, or still is in that Southern California area. And I think, Vic had that way. I mean, my mother's an ENFP, like everybody thought they were Vic's best friend. And yeah, that's great. But with that is coming back to nuts and bolts, to being frank with, tennis teaching. Again, to be on a staff and say, well, wait a minute, what you're telling that kid. And it's just, but that's where, I think Dave Anderson for years now, I mean, I've been in that situation. We're in large camps, large programs. So maybe say he has 200 students. For the most part, let's say we're going to have 20, but they're going to all be in front of me like all day. I'm not doing private lessons. We'll do videos and charge a private fee, but it's like, no. I remember telling a club owner in Chicago, this is during I guess you'd call it a recession, that adults weren't spending money on their tennis. So adult tennis went down, but junior tennis didn't go down, where it was totally off the charts. But this indoor club, there was like 7,200 square feet, and all these people were giving privates. And I remember saying to the club owners, I said, what I would do on a Saturday for sure is, you got a pro who's got 8 privates, is tell those kids to come all 8 hours. Tell them to pack a lunch. Tell them to bring their school books. But then it's a skill set. If you have 8 different privates, 8 different levels, can you pull it off? And you should be able to. Even if you just have one court, come for the day. Bring your books, bring your lunch. But that, I like the idea of saying that it's not practical in many ways, but the 12 5-minute lessons, they're better than one 60-minute lesson. It's a cash register that regulates that. But there's a book, a narrative. Barry Hendy called me up this week. Great guy. He came to visit, and he wrote, 70, 80 page narrative on being with us for a week. It's called Journey to the Truth. And it's like, wait a minute, but that's where A and B, and then there's C. So teaching pro A and teaching pro B, not in any order, but A and B, Smith and Jones. And I disagree with Jones. I mean, it's my father used to say it's healthy to disagree. You wouldn't want everybody to be the same. But it's C, it's the child. A and B got to get together. What are they going to tell C? What are they going to tell that child? And all the mixed messages. But no, I certainly have been known to be frank, but I think that being honest, and it's like, whoa, I can't believe you just said that. Certainly with a Braden or a Vandermeer touch where you can do it with a little bit of laughter, the truth hurts. The truth will set you free. But one, I think getting people in tennis to know the truth, but then do they have the guts to deliver the truth? And if the guts mean, well, that kid may not come back, they may be unhappy. And it shouldn't just be for profit. It shouldn't just be for the bottom line. But that's where education. I can't think of Michelle's last name. I did a clinic. Or I was.
Michelle Rouse.
She's in charge of cardio tennis.
I believe it's Michelle Rouse. I could have the wrong last name, but I'm pretty sure that's who it is. But I could be wrong.
That doesn't ring a bell. But,
No.
but maybe it was. I'm thinking of a maiden name. It's like, you mentioned 30 years. I'm going to Texas. It's like, well, when's the last time I was in Texas? Just think of my sons. I mean, 34, 35 years old. It seems like, boom, yesterday. Time goes by so fast. But I remember Michelle saying, well, Steve, I know that you're working with tournament players, so you probably don't feed as fast. And you and I were doing this rapid fire Braden feed for the kids. And I tell the parents, I said, well, I'm good at three things. Lincoln Logs, which is the 1960 version of Legos, and ball hockey, street hockey, and feeding balls. I can feed balls well. But people don't see me feed balls. And the reason you don't see me feed balls is I'm not going to feed you balls until you can hit the ball. You have to go through all this, then a lot of times you have to take people backwards. And it's not like you're adding to their game. You have to subtract, they got 15 extra movements on their forehand. And, but tell us your idea of a stress buster with 5 baskets of balls.
Yeah, well, we learned how to do combination drills, basically a combination drill and just doing different drills in an hour or an hour and a half. So basically my thing is get 4 or 5 baskets, full baskets, 350 baskets, basically just feeding a ton of combination drills, a ton of balls within an hour, and just getting people exhausted. People like to exercise. If people want to come out for exercise, they get exercise. But we're the club I'm at right now. I develop a nice following for people that want to work out at different tier levels of cardio, a higher intensity level, a moderate intensity level, or more of an easier intensity level. So it's really about offering a product and offering a service. And I've also grown, and I'm offering other types of programs at the club that are popular. And but that's something obviously I'm fortunate that I learned with you in Rochester, is this style of cardio tennis class. And I literally have people that come to my class and they say I've never worked out harder on a tennis court than what I just did. And others that go to a different, I even have one gentleman who went to a very popular club and joined a very, very expensive multi-purpose athletic facility called Chelsea Piers. There's the original Chelsea Piers is in New York City, and then I'm in Fairfield County, Connecticut. So there's another Chelsea Piers that has opened up in Stamford, Connecticut. You'd absolutely fall in love with a place like this, because you have AstroTurf fields to do soccer, to do all these activities. You have an ice skating rink, you have gymnastics, you have an Olympic-sized swimming pool, you have everything under the sun. You have squash, you have everything that you could possibly imagine under one. It's like 2 hangars, a really, really huge facility. I'm trying to think where I was going.
You're too young for brain camp program. Senior moment. I have those.
Yeah, I know. I completely forgot where I was going with it.
No problem.
Remind me what the question was.
We're talking about, Michelle Krause.
Oh, right. It's Michelle Krause. Yes, Michelle Krause in cardio tennis. But I still don't remember where I was going with this.
With no, that's fine. I think with tennis teaching. For our listeners, certainly I have these long conversations. It's amazing how many people said they like these formats. People can listen to these podcasts 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. But I'd say most tennis podcasts, they're just talking to famous people that are connected to famous people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. But we've had teenagers and high school coaches and interns, and we've had, some of our pillars that fortunately are still with us. We had Costas, who's with us right now, and a gal from Brazil, brought her daughter here, played college tennis. And they spent a morning with Ivano Surets. He's 24 years old. And he's been immersed in this for almost 2 years. He was exposed to it before he came to a camp several years ago. And the same day that happened, I had many people send me from the USTA, the governing body of tennis. There now is I think they're calling it Player Development Council. It's not Teaching Pro Council. And a lot of famous people that are listed on that. And, okay, more power to them. But really what needs to happen is we need to have the youth of America be trained to teach tennis, especially with what's going on in pickleball. Years ago, Paul Rodert, he's from the Netherlands. His father one time was a captain of the Davis Cup team. And he has a PhD in biomechanics, class act. He's been with the USTA 3 different times. He's there now, I believe, still with University U. And I mean, he spent some time around Gating area, like Coto de Casa, Vic Braden. And Craig Tiley, who was part of Tennis Tech, and you did a number of things with him. When he was in charge of player development, and now he's the CEO, but initially he was in charge of player development. He said that it would take him 10 years to have a network of coaches. So Rob Krajicek at the time, Austin, who's born in 1990, so he's 34. He was 17 or 18, and he was, if he wasn't one, he's 1, 2, or 3 in the U.S. Won Kalamazoo. So he calls up player development, talks to Paul Rodert, and said, I read where Craig Tiley said it'd take him 10 years to have a network of tennis coaches. And, Rob Krajicek said, using my name in third person, Steve Smith already has that network. And, long story short is that eventually with Rob, there was one long meeting where it was just initially Paul. And I went with videos, for example. One was of a young Pete Sampras. And one of his support staff members came in and said, is that your son? And now it's a famous video. But when I was running Tennis Tech, I remember having a lab assistant say, your job is to film everything that's on TV, any tennis on TV. And I'd have all these short clips. I remember one of Tim Henman. He's in a squash court hitting volleys, and he's no bigger, he's no higher than this table. And so this woman asked the question first time I led slide. She asked the second question. And she said, are you testing that player on a full-size court? And I said, yeah, the player's on a full-size court. And the third time, is that your son? I said, no, it's Pete Sampras. And but with that, the USTA does, or they have. I've been doing this 50 years, but someone who I knew quite well, his job at one time was to travel all over the country and observe umpires. There needs to be grip police, ready position police. Or you got these people saying defund the police. Tennis needs police. Coming back to Dave Anderson, where obviously he's done a great job, and it's a vibrant, it's like a little tennis city, and so many people have done well. But it would be like the Harry Hopman, where Harry Hopman was on a golf court. He went court to court. The director really should not, in a perfect world, not be tied to the student, especially that private lesson that people want one-on-one. You can't argue with one-on-one. That would be, like for yourself to go in and say, Richard Bodian is going to come to the club, he's going to work as a consultant, and he's going to introduce basics. But what would need to happen is if you showed up with people who could flat out play. That's where I do think that the people who really become great players, they're secure in their own skin. But a lot of times people, if they're basing their tennis teaching career on how they played, but they only played, college tennis say they didn't win and this is again more BS, but they won the NCAAs. Well, that makes them a better tennis teacher, better tennis coach. But that's really coming back to I just asked this woman from Brazil who's living in the States now, has a young daughter with her husband, and with Casas, I said, what did you think of the knowledge base of that young player? And it starts with core information. Okay, let's teach you everything about the court. Let's teach you everything about the racket. It's pretty simple. Racket face, throw of the racket, body of the racket. Let's teach you the grips. Let's teach you body balance position. Let's teach you the checkpoints. And throughout that, we're going to give you tennis math. And the number one reason is prevention of injury. And that's what needs to happen. Coming back to Craig Tiley, he eventually did quite a few things with Vic. You had Vic over as a guest in Australia. Now, to my recollection, like so many of my students, I think that he did he had Vic at Illinois. I certainly was the first person to go to Illinois to help out Jennifer and Craig, but they had, I could just say, okay, remember I went to Colorado with him once. He went to Massachusetts once. But the thing is that he knew Vic Braden resource. He didn't, at one point, he's on his way to win a national title. Vic Braden walked in the room, he wouldn't have known who he was. But just like yourself, before you met Vic Braden, the man, you knew Vic Braden upside down and inside out. Mm-hmm. And that's what needs to happen. It's information. And it's just like, okay, the alphabet, we've got A, this is the sound, this is the shape. But again, it comes back to credibility. It's kind of like the scene in The Godfather where Sonny's not going to go in and, I don't want him to go in and he's hanging on to a certain part of his body. Then they plant a gun. And so you go in. I have some tricks up my sleeve where I've gone places and now, who's this old man? And I just roll out the tiebreaker test. I just fill out, okay. You're just going to feed some balls, like a Vandermeer thing. We're going to feed 10 balls to this target. And you got to get their attention. Like, right, okay, they need to learn. And what happens is people go so far in tennis, so long, I should say. They don't go that far. They go a long period of time before they find out, their circle's too small. Before they really find out, like, they've got some major holes in their game. But I guess to end this podcast, it's great to talk to you. Maybe you've already said it 1,000 times over, but how to, your commissioner for the day, how to improve tennis in the States.
Ooh. Well, it's really, it's getting more to basically have this information, just product knowledge, be trained and know how to teach tennis well and know the, be a Braden student or just have the information and be able to transfer the information, honestly, and don't have an ego about it, and just learn the craft, learn the profession, the craft, like you did, and I did. It's harder. It's obviously harder nowadays because you don't have one spot that you can go to and say, okay, this is the, you go back and my daughter just, I just moved her into college, right? So she's going to George Washington University. She's going into her freshman year. She's going in there as a history major. Well, she's got to learn. She's got to go in there. She's got to do courses. She's got to progress upwards, and she's got to take courses to get her to whatever profession or business she wants to do, whether or not she wants to go to politics or wherever she wants to go next. But she's going to school to higher education to get her where, for the next stage. Well, my son is a mathematics major. He's at SMU. He's going into his senior year. He's got to go through his courses and he's got to get educated so that he can get into the business world and make a living for himself, make the profession. Just way too easy for tennis coaches or tennis players or whatever to get into this profession and not have the knowledge. So it's just a matter of, being able to educate yourself and be a student of the game, and put the ego aside and just learn. But you know, it's tough. I go back and I say you are the Tennis Tech was the model. And if I were to say to somebody, well, where do you want to, if you want to go, go and teach tennis and be in the profession? Well, it's right now it's here because you're offering not only education for those to learn how to play the game, but you're also providing knowledge for parents, and you're providing knowledge for other teachers to really understand and be able to teach the game. But that's hard. It's about getting the word out and having people more trained. But if it was me, I'd say there's got to be another Tennis Tech. There's got to be a place that's known to go to learn how to teach this profession, and go back to have a Tennis Tech. That's
Yeah.
and you get well known for that. Your Tennis Tech was, you said it yourself. I mean, you had over 35 states and over 30 countries. Well, you have people coming. When I was there, it was somebody from Japan, Puerto Rico, Mexico. They're all over the place. Coming in. Germany. There were people that came in from all around the world. Now, maybe they didn't know what they were getting into, but if it was promoted as this, and it's got to be backed by the USTA or the USPTA or all of them or whatever. But I'd say, in my opinion, if you got the organizations together and said, okay, well, this is where we go. This is the Institute of Learning for tennis. And then this is the person that's got to head it. And that's going to be, that would get, and then people can come in from all over the world, and then they can get they can get this information that you're providing to help them really be in the profession / business. That would be my take on it. And, that's, selfish way to think about it, but that's what it would be necessary.
I think saying a Braden student, Vic would be the first one to say, well, don't use my name and don't call it a method. Galileo and Newton were here a long time before us. But I think the phrase fact-based instruction for long-term development, or fact-based instruction for safe tennis, safe. I do think that in tennis, it's always been too much. 98% people skills, 2% product knowledge. It is true that people learn to play the game. Certainly, you got to take your hat off to them for having some confidence and being able to be on stage, the tennis court. But also, too, even like in your situation, that does the club owner, like, okay, you're in charge, is people versus profit, and then it starts at the top. And I think in talking to you, it's great to have you here in person versus just talking to you via telephone. That jockocracy for yourself, when I met you way back when, you talked about your introversion, is you didn't have the jockocracy, that ability or inability, believe me, it's an inability too, to how you talk to an athlete. But you certainly, in watching you be here the last several days, you do that now. But no, I really appreciate you being on our podcast. I'm sure there's a lot of pearls for sure, golden nuggets. Costas, thanks for manning the phone, and give me the high five. Hey, we signed off episode 212. Been great to have Richard here. Your tennis treasure chest. He's definitely shared some golden nuggets in his story. It's a great story. We can all learn from his path in tennis. But Richard wants to say a few words. Go ahead.
Well, obviously, it's an honor and a privilege to be here in the room with you. If I were to make a reference to a tree, you've learned from quite a few professionals in the game: Vic Braden, Welby Van Horn, Dennis Vandermeer, Jim Verdick. The list goes on and on. I would consider those gentlemen more the roots. I consider you a very, very, very strong trunk in that. I consider myself a leaf. There's other branches in that tree of other professionals that you have trained that have done more in the game and really have done well in the profession, and to help spread the knowledge, fact-based knowledge in the game. But I see myself as a leaf in that tree. But you're definitely that solid trunk. If anybody has an interest in knowing the profession, the business, be anywhere involved in tennis, I can't stress enough that they should seek out the gentleman right across from me. That's Mr. Steve Smith, who I regard as one of the most knowledgeable, or if not the most knowledgeable, tennis professionals in the world.
I don't really need the Kleenex, but no, thank you so much for your kind words. And it's an honor to have you here to visit. Honor to have you part of our tree. And with that, the tree needs to keep growing. For the betterment of tennis, just go to greatbasetennis.com.